7. They live with their Canadian mother, but are too young to remember their British father, a notorious IS militant. They're both fascinated with a cartoon doorknob they've spotted on television. They've never seen one in real life and are convinced it has magical properties. Camps like this have been their home for almost 4 years. Nearby there's an empty concrete patch, the foundations of a tent where a French family lived until a few months ago, when France repatriated them. Younger children here know that a bus comes and takes people away, to faraway places where there are doorknobs, houses, and grandparents waiting for them. But the teenagers tell me they feel stuck here, abandoned by their countries. They remember life under Islamic State group's brutal regime, when children were trained to fight. Some were also forced to appear in propaganda videos showcasing the group's education system. But what IS built under its so-called caliphate wasn't an education system. It was an indoctrination system. And for some children, the indoctrination continues within these camps, living around women who still believe in IS and its ideology. One boy who featured in an IS recruitment video tells me he wants to go to a real school. He's heard that in Trinidad, where he's from, school lasts all day with different lessons, field trips and sports. The Caribbean island had one of the highest proportional rates of recruitment to IS. Entire families abandon their lives for the false promise of an Islamic utopia. One 16-year-old girl tells me she rarely leaves her tent. She wants to train to be a teacher, but knows only too well that the longer she stays in this camp, the less likely that dream will be fulfilled. Her uncle back in Trinidad's lobbying to bring her home, but the government there isn't currently repatriating its citizens. She tells me she misses her 2 teenage brothers. When IS was defeated back in 2019, she says they were taken to what she calls the boys' place. The boys' place is the Al-Huri Rehabilitation Centre, about an hour's drive away. The Syrian Democratic Forces, or SDF, a coalition of militias which is running this centre, says it's a place where boys are de-radicalised. It's in a residential area. It could almost be a school, but there are armed guards patrolling the roof, preventing the boys from breaking out and IS militants from breaking in. Groups of older boys huddle under the arches of the low red brick building. It's quieter than the camps, tranquil almost. There are trees and a garden in the central courtyard. How the SDF decides which boys to bring here is opaque. The conditions are better than in the camps. There are dormitories, lessons, structure. But the boys growing up here are alone, away from their families, and they tell me they miss their mothers. I talked to one of them, a 21-year-old called Sule. He was 11 when his mother and stepfather brought him to Syria. He thought they were all going to Egypt on a family holiday. Sule lived under IS for nearly 5 years. He says his mother did all she could to keep him away from the battlefield, from being forced to fight. He's popular amongst staff at the centre, organising dance classes and sports sessions for the other boys. But Sule worries what will happen to him if he's left here indefinitely. His big fear is that he could be moved to an adult men's prison, full of battle-hardened IS fighters. I'm not a terrorist, he tells me. I never was, and I never will be.
That was Poonam Taneja, and you can hear more on this story on Bloodlines, a new podcast from the BBC and CBC in Canada. Just search for Bloodlines wherever you get your podcasts. Lastly, we take you to Germany, an economic powerhouse with aims of making that power less detrimental to our climate. The governing Green Party has been working on plans to phase out oil and gas heaters in German homes in favour of non-polluting heat pumps. This plan is one part of much wider ambitions for a green revolution in Germany, which has come to a grinding halt after a recent court decision blew a €60 billion hole in the project's finances. The German Green Party has historically been one of the strongest across Europe, but many German voters are starting to question the cost of going green. Bob Howard has been canvassing opinion in Bremen in the northwest.
It was a wet and windy Friday afternoon when I popped into Britta Lockhart's warm and cosy restaurant. It's called the Pustorper Lighthouse, and it's in Woltmershausen, a working-class suburb of Bremen. The restaurant has a definite nautical theme, with fishing nets and pictures of boats in rough seas adorning the walls. Britta herself has a hearty look, with clear blue eyes and brown hair. She serves down-to-earth comfort food, like sausages and sauerkraut, and her eatery is a well-known meeting place for local community groups. She's run the restaurant for 10 years now, but she says if things don't get better over the next couple of months, she may have to close. Food prices have soared, but even more worryingly, the cost of heating has doubled. But the idea of raising her prices is something she fears would also put her out of business. Britta feels the financial pressures on people like her are being ignored, and she's being left behind by the mainstream political parties. So in state elections earlier this year, she voted for a right-wing populist party called Citizens in Rage. It's highly sceptical about many of the policies enacted both locally in Bremen and across Germany, and the impact they're having on people like Britta, especially with a cost of living crisis. Germany's green turnaround, the Energiewende, is one of them. The country aims to transition to a low-carbon economy and find a new way to heat people's homes, with a target to reach net carbon neutrality by 2045. Citizens in Rage came from almost nowhere to capture 10% of the vote, while the Green Party vote fell by almost half in the local polls. Their contrasting fortunes may be partly due to the controversy over what the German tabloid papers characterised as the Heizhammer a month before. The heating hammer was a new law that would have effectively banned the introduction of new gas and oil-fired boilers in Germany for heating homes from 2024. To see what impact that might have on the average German, I visited a family in another neighbourhood of Bremen called Findorf. Dörte Lange-Schwartz lives there with her husband Michael in a terraced house. Dörte's pretty much retired from her job as a remedial education nurse, so they're both having to live off their pensions. And that means keeping an eye on the thermostat. They're keeping it down to 19 degrees in the living room, 15 in other parts of the house. They calculated how much they would have to pay to install a heat pump, which absorbs air from outside in order to heat a home inside. The estimate was around €45,000, almost their entire annual income. Perhaps not surprisingly, despite being Green Party voters, Dörte and Michael think that's too much to pay, especially if they want to have any sort of holiday or even to eat out occasionally. With half of German homes heated by gas and almost a quarter by oil, it's easy to see why the heating hammer has become such a political hot potato. After such a negative reaction, the German government was forced to water down the regulations, which means new gas boilers won't be phased out until 4 years later than originally planned, in 2028. Julia Tedderman is one of the MPs elected to the local parliament for the first time to represent the local Citizens in Rage party. She says the mainstream political parties just aren't listening to people on the street.
And that's all for this edition of the programme. The producer was Polly Hope, and we'll be back next week with more stories from around the world here on From Our Own Correspondent on the BBC World Service.
That was the BBC programme From Our Own Correspondent.
Good morning, Manitoba. Welcome to Information Radio here on CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM in Winnipeg. I'm Emily Brass, filling in today and this week for Marcy Markusa. With me in the studio today is our show director, Pat Kanuga, and our studio technician, Abby Adiemi. And right now we're going to go to some news headlines with CBC's Heather Wells.
Good morning. Well, a St. Teresa Point First Nation grandmother is joining a proposed class action lawsuit her community is launching against the federal government. Oh, the state of housing. Debbie Harper's house is full of mold. The ceiling is caved in. 14 people are crammed into a 3-bedroom house. We're going to hear more from her about what that's like. We'll also hear about how the chief of that community says they need about 300 homes in their community of 4,000 people. And a pro-Israel activist was arrested yesterday in an attempt to stage a counter-protest at the Canadian Museum for Human Rights. Ron East says he was charged with obstructing a police officer before the pro-Palestinian protest. We'll hear what happened in our next local news coming up at 6:30.
Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
That's CBC's Heather Wells in the newsroom. Well, here's what's coming up on this hour of the show. Why believing in everyday miracles is so important to one rabbi during this time of Hanukkah. That's up at 6:20, as well with growing concerns about the rising cost of living and affordable housing shortages for foreign students. Canada announced it'll be limiting the number of study permits for international students and raising the financial requirements for those who get accepted. As well, there's a new word that describes the act of adults doing childish things. We'll explore the concept of kidulting. And a Winnipeg Centenarian shares some of the secrets to a long life, and some of them involve pizza. We'll find out more. Stick around with us. Quick forecast, cloudy today. Slight chance of flurries this morning, becoming a mix of sun and cloud this afternoon. Quite windy with gusts up to 60 kilometers an hour around noon. Mainly cloudy tonight. Slight chance of flurries. Windy again with a low of minus 13. And then tomorrow, clearing in the morning. Windy, becoming breezy, and with a high of minus 7. You're listening to Information Radio on CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM in Winnipeg. I'm Emily Brass, filling in for Marcy Markusa. World Report is up next.
On Cue with Tom Power.
Daniel McIver is one of the most celebrated playwrights in the history of Canadian theatre. His plays Monster and Here Lies Henry broke the form of what a one-man show could be. But now Daniel's in the audience watching other people perform his work, and he'll be here to tell you how that feels.
It's not a holy thing, the text. The text is a tool.
That's coming up on Cue, followed by Commotion with Elamine Abdel Mahmoud on CBC Radio 1, CBC Listen app, and everywhere you get your podcasts.
This is World Report. I'm John Northcott. The Global Climate Summit in Dubai is in the home stretch. Nations are feeling the pressure to find common ground on the future of fossil fuels. It's a key issue that could determine whether the climate talks taking place right now are deemed to be historic or turn out to be a disappointment. The CBC Bax has more from Dubai.
Good morning, all. Are we surviving?
A sleep-deprived yet determined Simon Steele, head of UN climate change, still hopeful countries will agree on new efforts to tackle global warming, even though it's nearly home time.
Negotiators have a chance right here in Dubai over the next 24 hours to start a new chapter.
Representatives from nearly 200 countries are weighing whether consensus can be reached on main priorities, like tripling the amount of renewable energy and doubling energy efficiency around the globe by 2030. There's also the controversial push to phase out fossil fuels by 2050.
It's pretty tense and nervous. Everything hangs in the balance.
Tom Evans is watching negotiations closely. He's with E3G, a UK-based climate change think tank. Never before has an agreement from a UN climate change conference made any mention of fossil fuels. And there is still stiff opposition here in Dubai.
Especially countries like Saudi Arabia, where they're saying this isn't something that we should be agreeing at all. We're reaching the really sharp end of the negotiations where everything's at stake.
Without an agreement on fossil fuels, the head of the UN says the climate summit could be seen as a disappointment, even with progress in other areas. Even if nations strike a deal to phase out coal, oil, and natural gas, any change would be gradual, especially considering the world is consuming more oil now than ever before, and demand is expected to climb further over the next few years. Kyle Bax, CBC News, Dubai.
The federal government is unveiling new details of an expanded dental care program today. It's one of the key initiatives the Liberals agreed to as part of a deal with the NDP. The $13 billion benefit will soon cover dental work for older children and some seniors, but their family income must be under a certain threshold. JP Tasker has the details.
If you have one or more kids at home, you know that sending them to the dentist is not cheap.
At this time last year, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau announced a big expansion of the social safety net.
We're delivering real change with the launch of the Canada Dental Benefit.
A government source tells CBC News that the next phase of the benefit will be announced later today. Here's how it will work. If you have a family income of under $90,000 a year and you don't have access to private insurance, Ottawa will soon pick up the tab for some of your family's dental care.
But that there are 500,000 kids in this country who don't have access to dental care.
The program already includes eligible kids under 12 years of age. Coverage will now be expanded to include kids under 18. And some seniors and people with disabilities will have access, the government source said. The Liberal goal is to cover all eligible groups by 2025. NDP leader Jagmeet Singh.
And when it comes to dental care, we're going to keep on fighting to make sure that no family has to make a difficult choice of putting off essential care for their teeth because they can't afford it.
The NDP has agreed to prop up the Liberal government if it delivers on this initiative and pharmacare. JP Tasker, CBC News, Ottawa.
The UN's Humanitarian office says its staff are struggling to receive aid in Gaza. It says there is a shortage of trucks and communications blackouts are complicating operations. Beyond that, the war being waged across Gaza is making it too difficult to distribute aid beyond the Rafah region. Margaret Evans brings us the latest.
More than 2 months into Israel's war against Hamas, fighting now rages right across Gaza. Nearly 2 million Palestinians displaced, many more than once as they seek shelter, especially from Israeli airstrikes, with the UN now calling the humanitarian situation catastrophic. Envoys from some UN Security Council countries have been invited by the United Arab Emirates to visit Rafah today, after Washington blocked a resolution on a humanitarian ceasefire on Friday. Palestinians in occupied East Jerusalem and the West Bank are staging a general strike in support of Gazans. Political analyst Noor Odeh says all Palestinians feel abandoned by the outside world.
Palestinians feel that we've been sent to the slaughterhouse and that there is international agreement that it's okay, that somehow calling for a ceasefire is not conducive to peace.
So far, the Israeli government has resisted calls for a ceasefire, saying that to end the fighting now would be to jeopardize Israel's goal of ensuring that Hamas can't hurt Israel again. Hamas has said that no hostages will leave Gaza alive unless Israel meets its demands. Margaret Evans, CBC News, Jerusalem.
Aid to Ukraine and its membership in the EU are supposed to be featured high on the agenda as European Union foreign ministers meet in Brussels today. But there is one holdup. Hungary has asked that it be removed. As Abby Kugadasan tells us, Ukraine says it needs more support now to help defend against Russia.
It's 26 versus 1 ahead of a European Union summit later this week. Hungary appears more than ready to veto further financial aid for Ukraine and throw a wrench into membership talks.
For the people of Ukraine, it will be a highly demotivational decision.
Ukraine's Foreign Minister Dmytro Kuleba.
It will send a message across the continent that the European Union is unable to make decisions of historic nature and keep its promises. So I think it will be devastating for both.
The EU is looking at providing an additional 50 billion euros in economic support to Kyiv, but Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban has made his reluctance to help quite evident over the course of the war. He maintains close ties with Russian President Vladimir Putin and calls for watered-down sanctions against the Kremlin. Orban says the bloc is shoving Ukrainian membership to the EU down their throats. Some experts say even if Orban blocks the fresh aid, the 26 other member states could still send aid on their own, bilaterally. But Ukraine has already seen the latest American package be held back by Senate Republicans in recent days. And if the EU is unable to unanimously agree this week, it threatens to undermine the West's promise that it'll stick with Ukraine for as long as it takes. Abby Kowaldason, CBC News, Berlin.
In Washington, a trial for Rudy Giuliani will begin today. The court will determine how much he will have to pay two Georgia election workers whom he falsely accused of fraud. Giuliani was one of Donald Trump's frontmen pushing the former president's baseless election theft claims in 2020. Giuliani has already been found liable in the case. The Golden Globe nominations will be announced later today in Beverly Hills. In recent years, the award show has seen its share of controversy. As freelance reporter Steve Futterman tells us, it's not the only legacy award show. trying to remain relevant in a changing media landscape.
For the last 3 years, the Golden Globes have been mired in controversy.
I'm here because I'm black.
In 2021, a Los Angeles Times investigation revealed that the Hollywood Foreign Press Association, which hands out the awards, had no black members. The organization promised changes.
For 8 months, we have worked tirelessly as an organization to be better.
But some scars are slow to heal. And that may be one of the reasons that with the 2024 Golden Globes less than 1 month away, the show still doesn't have a host. A number of big-name stars have reportedly said no, including
Will Smith just smacked the shit out of me.
Comedian Chris Rock. The last time he hosted a high-profile award show, the Oscars last year, he was slapped in the face by actor Will Smith. The Golden Globes have never been taken as seriously as the Oscars, but they have had a reputation for irreverence and a party-like atmosphere.
Leonardo DiCaprio attended the premiere, and by the end, his date was too old for him.
Now, however, award shows in general are simply not as popular as they once were. Even the biggest, the Oscar presentation,
and the Oscar goes to,
has seen its viewership cut in half in the last 10 years. And as streaming and other delivery systems become more popular, award shows may face new obstacles. Steve Futterman for CBC News, Los Angeles.
And finally, Google's roundup of the year's hot-button search items has arrived. In the news category, the Israel-Hamas war is number 1, followed by questions about the Titanic-bound submersible that imploded in June. Matthew Perry and Tina Turner led all search trends related to notable deaths. And in the world of entertainment, Barbie was the number 1 searched movie. The second most searched movie, Oppenheimer. The Barbenheimer strikes again. That is the latest national and international news from World Report. For news anytime, you can go to our website, cbcnews.ca. Just Google it up. I'm John Northcott. This is CBC News.
Good morning, Manitoba. You're listening to Information Radio on CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM in Winnipeg. I'm Emily Brass, filling in this week for Marcy Markusa. Here's what's coming up on the show. The significance of Hanukkah and its meaning today. We'll hear a rabbi's reflections at 6:20. McDonald's is launching a new adult Happy Meal this week. CBC's Blair Sanderson will explore what's driving the trend towards juvenile junk food. They're lightweight, often useful, and can easily fit into a stocking, but are gift cards a bit impersonal? We'll talk to a retail analyst about why they become so popular and what some of the pitfalls might be. But first, a Winnipeg Centenarian shares some secrets to a long life, and some of them involve pizza. All that and more coming up on Information Radio. Right now, it's 11 minutes after 6 o'clock. Time for news headlines with Heather Wells.
Good morning. Well, Judy Waychuk is getting ready for hip surgery this week in North Dakota, even though Manitoba's new government cancelled out-of-province surgeries last month. She's one of the Manitobans who had her out-of-province surgery booked before the NDP wound down that program. We're going to hear from her coming up. And True North Real Estate Development and the Southern Chiefs Organization plan to work together to redevelop downtown Winnipeg. Sources tell CBC News True North and the Southern Chiefs plan to sign an agreement tomorrow. We'll hear more coming up in our next local news at 6:30.
Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
That's Heather Wells from the CBC News Desk. And joining me now in studio is Pat Kanuga with a look at the traffic and weather.
Good morning. How are you?
Well, I'm doing pretty good. How are you, Pat?
Well, I am well. Boy, first time we've ever, I think, worked together on the air, right?
I know. What a pleasure. And I'm just getting it under the wire
It's my
here.
swan song.
Exactly.
So I'm out of here at the end of the year.
A bucket list item.
Well, thanks for being with us. How was your Friday night?
Well, Friday night was our staff party, and boy, the weather was a little challenging. It was icy on the street surface, and then that blowing snow, rather.
And I was out and about yesterday. It was pretty slippery. I had a hockey game to go to with my boy out in East Selkirk, and yeah, it was slick around 3:30 in the afternoon. I thought it was going to be a real bad drive this morning coming in, but it was my drive-in was uneventful, and the traction was pretty good actually up on Highway 9 coming into the city. I'll mention the traffic line here. 788-3093 is the traffic line to reach me if there's anything you need to tell us about on your commute this morning in central, southern, or northern Manitoba, wherever you may be. As far as the weather goes, here's Addiemi with today's forecast for Winnipeg.
Good morning, Pat. Good morning, Emily. You're talking about the sleek roads yesterday and the weekend. It was like really hard for a lot of people driving in the city. Currently in Winnipeg, we are at -7. Today's going to be cloudy, 30% chance of flurries this morning. Then it's going to be becoming a mix of sun and cloud later this afternoon. The wind is south 30 km, and it's going to be gusting 40 northwest later near the noon period. And tonight will be chilly. We'll be heading, it's actually going to be feeling like -16. And then, as you get for your lunch break later today, it's still going to be feeling like -10. So you need to brace for that. And, talking about tonight, also expect some flurries later in the day because it will be coming your way, but no sign of snow. That's one thing, Emily, I checked it, and no sign of snow today.
Oh, okay, good. They said a little chance, but
just a little chance. So I'll take that. But the cold, it's kind of cold today, so you might want to dress appropriately for that. Okay.
Yeah.
That's all for now. Pat will be in later to give you like the snapshot of what's going to be happening across the province as it concerns the weather. This is Abby, and the number to call for traffic 788-3093.
Good morning. It's coming up on 6:15, and you're listening to Information Radio on CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM in Winnipeg. I'm Emily Brass, filling in this week for Marcy Markusa. Well, most people look forward to the easy life after retirement, but that's something Winnipegger Antoinetta Lomananko is not doing. She turns 100 years old today and will spend her birthday making pizza. She works 3 days a week at her son Jerry Lomananko's Sorrento's Pizza Restaurant at the Commuter Centre in Winnipeg. CBC's Gavin Axelrod rolled up to her birthday bash to discover the secret to a long life, and her son Jerry translated.
Well, part of the reason why we're here, so when we were kids, she had to make a decision whether to come to Canada or move somewhere else in Italy, and she moved here hoping to give us a better life. We all met our wives and husbands here, and our families growing. Everybody's quite happy, and we're all pretty blessed. I'll have to say that.
How old was your mother when she moved to Canada?
So we came here in 1967. She was 46, and my dad was 56. That's why for us, it's such a big thing, because that was a big step for them to come to Canada, not knowing the culture, not knowing the climate, not knowing just such a strange country from Italy. But they made the jump to come here, and it was, again, all to give us 4 kids a better life, and that's why we respect her so much for that, because we've been able to live very nicely here in Winnipeg.
Where in Italy is your mother originally from?
So it's a small town called Muro Lucano. It's in I guess the capital city would be Potenza. It's in the Basilicata region. It's probably, I would say, a couple hundred kilometers south of Naples.
My question for you is, what's it, like to see all these people out here to celebrate you?
Che pensa di questa gente qua?
Qua festa perché c'è danno.
I guess it's a party for me. I guess I lived 100, so it's a pretty special time.
And, what's the secret to living to 100?
Che lo segreto che c'è danno? Che lo segreto?
Halloween.
Some wine, good food. She only has 2 meals a day, and she's always done that. Breakfast and supper. No snacking and nothing in between. And I keep saying, a nice glass of wine every night. Then that's homemade wine too.
What's the reason for not snacking?
Perché dice che tu fai 2 pranzi, non mangi mai, fai colazione e poi mangi la sera. Perché non mangio io? Yeah. She goes, just never really had the desire to eat. Yeah, she always just ate 2 meals. And I think, it could be back to when she was a young person, because we used to have land outside of our hometown. So they would have to walk there and then eat when they got there, work all day, and then walk back. And I guess all day working, they didn't really have time to stop. And I think that's kind of just became a habit of hers, and that continued her whole life.
You were talking, I heard, the pasta was made by your mother. I know she makes pizza as well. What's that like, to have your mother still being able to cook at 100 years old?
The fact that she's able and up and walking and be able to do these things, we're blessed that she can do that. Still make pasta, homemade pasta, still can make pizzas, still can make dough, pizza dough.
Did you ever think you'd be at your 100th birthday eating your own pasta?
Tu mai pensava che aveva accendano a mangiare la pasta che ho in casa? No. Never, I never thought. Oh yeah, she was just saying that when she was 20 years old, she had the bacterial meningitis, and she wasn't supposed to survive, and here she is 80 years later, still going strong.
What's changed, and what's something that miss that's maybe not around anymore?
Che tu sei ancora qua? Che una cosa che ti manca?
Manco mai perché sono sola.
She goes, she's by herself because she lost my father, of course. But she goes, but I'm amongst my kids all the time, so that kind of makes up for it a little bit.
It's your 100th birthday, and you're here with your grandkids. What's that like?
Che pensi che sei qua con tutte le nipoti?
Sono contenta,
Unbelievably happy, she said. Just to be able to see everybody makes me so happy. Yeah.
And I'll just ask you as well, talk to me about the importance of all the family that's here today.
It's a tribute to her. She's always been a really good woman, good person to everybody. There's actually more people that would love to be here, but we just can't accommodate everybody.
What is the secret, that keeps you loving pizza, making pizza and pasta so much?
Che è lo segreto che vuoi quando uno fa pizza e fa pasta, che sta con la famiglia? Yeah. It's always been being around the family. The food part, she's always loved to cook. But she loves being around the family. That's the big key.
It's your 100th birthday, but you're still working. I hear you work 3 shifts a week. Why do you like to keep working at your age?
Perché vuoi continuare a venire a fare qua?
Mi piace che sta cambiando la famiglia.
It's always because that she comes here. We're all here. She's amongst the family, and now that we're here, there's more other Italians. So not just our family, but everybody knows her as she's like everybody's grandmother now, and so that's more important. She likes just being here, being around everybody.
What's it like for you, to see your mom loved just by so many people?
It makes me super proud. She's always treated everybody so well that there's a reason why everybody loves her so much.
So I'm 22. What's the secret? What's the recipe for me to live to be 100, just like you?
Che da fai poi fino a 100 anni? Che è lo segreto? Che da fai?
Un bicchiere di vino.
A glass of wine every day. And a good meal. A couple of good meals a day, and no snacking.
Sounds like good advice. In fact, I wish I could taste her pizza right now. That was CBC's Gavin Axelrod speaking to Antoinetta Lomananko and her son Jerry, who was translating. She turns 100 years old today.
Christmas is a time for magic.
The talking snowman. Well, you don't surprise me anymore.
For tradition.
Gwen just has to have a present from Santa. You do it, Arthur.
And a time for love.
Be kind. And if you really want to see what people are, all you have to do is look.
Enjoy holiday favorites all Christmas Day on CBC and CBC Gem.
Good morning. It's just about 6:22 a.m. and you're listening to Information Radio on CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM in Winnipeg, worldwide on the CBC Listen app and on our YouTube page. I'm Emily Brass, filling in this week for Marcy Markusa. It's -7 right now at the Winnipeg airport with snow grains coming down, going up to a high of -2 today with a slight chance of flurries, down to -13 tonight. Again, a slight chance of flurries tonight and tomorrow, high of -7 with a mix of sun and cloud. Well, the Jewish community is in the midst of celebrating Hanukkah. Rabbi Cleo Rose joined Nadia Kidwai on the weekend morning show yesterday to hear about the significance of the holiday and the impact.
Depending on which historian you ask, there are different threads and different ways of understanding the Hanukkah story. What we know for sure is that Hanukkah takes place somewhere around the 2nd century BCE and commemorates, in part, the Maccabean victory over the Seleucid Empire. And of course, there are different important symbols that come up within the normative historical view of Hanukkah.
So for you, what when you think of Hanukkah and its origins, what are you kind of comfortable with?
Yeah, for me, it's all about the light.
Yeah. Tell us more about that.
Yeah. One of the things that's comes up in the Hanukkah story, the particular normative narrative I'm speaking about, is the idea that in the midst of the war, the Jews who have been pummeled and destroyed and their sacred epicenter, that is the temple, is being destroyed at the hands of this much mightier army, they're able to find a small cruse, a small jug of oil is the way that I remember hearing the story as a kid. It should have only lasted for 1 day, but it ends up lasting for 8 days. And of course, with that, all religions have light in common. But for us, light is a symbol of the wisdom of Torah. It's also a symbol of our connection to the divine. In fact, the way we look at it, the Kabbalists, especially the mystics, see that each person is made in the image of the divine, and the way that you hold on to that divinity is with that particular light. So when you and I have an exchange, when I meet with somebody else, my light is never diminished by the other person. In fact, it's just building and becoming brighter.
What resonates with you most about this particular celebration?
Yeah, this is a really hard year for those of us who are Jews and those of us who are strong Zionists like myself. This particular Hanukkah, I, along with many, many people in the Jewish community, are dedicating the lighting of the Hanukkah, the special candelabra, sometimes known as a menorah, but this one is specific for Hanukkah. We are dedicating it in the memory of those who were murdered at the hands of Hamas terrorists on October 7th. And we're also thinking a lot about those who still remain in captivity, who are taken hostage and are somewhere in Gaza. Where they are, we don't know. And we're thinking about them. We're thinking about their families. We're thinking about the soldiers that are protecting the land and the people of Israel. And for us, Israel isn't just some far-off location. It's the hub of Jewish life, and our security is so wrapped up in the well-being of Israel and the safety of Israel, and that impacts those of us living in the diaspora.
You had an interesting interaction with someone from outside of the Jewish community about Hanukkah. Can you share that with us?
Yeah. A very wonderful woman, a colleague of mine from within the Christian community, who said to me very, very honestly, and she said she's having every year she lights a menorah to celebrate her Jewish origins as a Christian, and to also support the Jewish community. And she felt this year very conflicted because the lighting of the candles is so public. In fact, from a Jewish legal perspective, you're supposed to put it in the window or even outside in your courtyard, which is done in Israel and other warmer climates than, say, Winnipeg. She felt that if by lighting the menorah, she would be choosing sides. In other words, it would be a statement in support of Israel versus the cause of the Palestinians. And so we had this conversation, and I said to her, I don't think that isn't, and I said it very, compassionately, but I said, I don't think that's sufficient. That's not a reason not to light this year. If anything, Jews are really feeling vulnerable and scared. There's a rise in anti-Semitism, which is really impacting our safety and our security and our existential situation. And so, if anything, one reason to do so is to support us in that regard. But there's also another layer of this, on a metaphysical level. If we really, all of our important religions, if we really value the idea that each person is made in the image of the divine, then you're recognizing that important facet. And I think that's light begets light. And I don't think it doesn't have to become a political symbol. Mm-hmm. It becomes a support of the presence of the divine. Surprise, I'm a big believer in God, right? And I think God and a God-fearing people of all kinds, not just in my own tradition, is a way to help benefit the whole of society. I'll give one more justification for this that I offered her as well. What I said to her is that this is about human freedom. And if we really buy into the Canadian ethos that we are the great cultural mosaic, then when she lights, that enables me to light. That enables my Muslim friends to light, in the sense of not lighting a candle necessarily for Hanukkah, but it enables them to feel the freedom to be able to participate in their religious sacred traditions as well. We're creating more space by doing that.
That was Cleo Rose speaking with the Weekend Morning Show's host, Nadia Kidwai. He's the rabbi at Etz Chaim Synagogue. Well, it's 29 minutes after 6 o'clock. Coming up on News Time soon, you're listening to Information Radio on CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM in Winnipeg. I'm Emily Brass, filling in this week for Marcy Markusa. Well, here's still what's coming up on this half hour of the show. We'll have a business report, and then after that, there's a new word that describes the act of adults doing childish things. CBC's Blair Sanderson will explore the concept of kidulting later in the show. As well, they're lightweight, often useful, and can easily fit into a stocking, but are gift cards a bit impersonal? We'll talk to a retail analyst about why they become so popular and what the pitfalls might be. That's coming up right after the news. The traffic line. If you're seeing anything out there, give us a call, 204-788-3093. The CBC News is next.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg at 6:30. It is -7, some snow grains out there. We're going to see a mix of sun and clouds by afternoon. That wind is going to switch directions and becomes quite strong from the northwest today, a high of -2. Judy Waychuk is getting ready for hip surgery in North Dakota this week, even though Manitoba's new government cancelled out-of-province surgeries last month. She is one of the Manitobans who had her out-of-province surgery booked before the NDP wound down the program. Waychuk says she feels bad for those who no longer have the option of travelling outside Manitoba for faster care.
If they were hoping to go out of province, they will probably be heartbroken, depressed, and angry. If they can get the surgery in Manitoba in a decent amount of time, that would be one thing. And hopefully, those issues are going to be addressed.
The former PC government cancelled out-of-province surgeries, a temporary measure while surgical capacity is built up in Manitoba. Tory health critic Kathleen Cook believes the program was cancelled too quickly. She says more staff should have been hired in the public healthcare system first. It was a day of more protests in Winnipeg. Pro-Palestinian supporters rallying on the grounds of and inside the Canadian Museum for Human Rights, lying down in the building representing those who have died in the ongoing war between Israel and Hamas. Ramsey Zeid at the Canadian Palestinian Association of Manitoba says the museum needs to show more awareness for his community.
let the Human Rights Museum know that they need to have something in the museum that recognizes Palestine.
Outside the CBC on Portage Avenue. Pro-Israel supporters calling for the release of hostages being held by Hamas in Gaza. Roman Lisak used to live in Israel. Lisak wants the hostages to know they are supported even far away in Canada.
Make sure the hostages see our support here. Like even in wintertime, we come here because we really care what happened.
Now, a pro-Israel activist was arrested yesterday before an attempt to stage a counter-protest at the Canadian Museum for Human Rights. Ron East says he was charged with obstructing a police officer before the pro-Palestinian protest. East says he was in a no-parking zone and an officer asked him to move. He says the officer asked for his driver's license, which he refused to give without knowing why. East says he was told if he didn't provide it, he would be arrested.
Handcuffed, thrown in the back of the police car, taken into the big police station, searched, stripped of all my clothing, taken upstairs, going through the whole routine as if I'm some kind of a criminal, thrown into a cell jail, come out, pictures, fingerprinting, the whole 9 yards.
CBC News has reached out to Winnipeg Police but has not yet received a response. A St. Teresa Point First Nation grandmother is joining a proposed class action lawsuit her community's launching against the federal government over the state of housing there. Debbie Harper's house is full of mold. The ceiling is caved in. 14 people are crammed into a 3-bedroom house. Harper's adult son has epilepsy. He had to build himself a shack in the backyard. She says the overcrowding and noise often triggers seizures.
We have a right to stay in our community. If we live in the city, we're going to be in the streets. At least we have a home, but it's not suitable for us. It's not fair for our children, and it's not fair for my grandchildren, and it's not fair for me.
The chief of the community of about 4,000 says they need 300 homes. True North Real Estate Development and the Southern Chiefs Organization plan to work together to redevelop downtown Winnipeg. Sources tell CBC News True North and the Southern Chiefs plan to sign an agreement tomorrow. True North has a $550 million plan to buy Portage Place and redevelop the mall. The Southern Chiefs are developing the former Bay building at a cost of $130 million. True North Real Estate President Jim Ludlow has said the two projects ought to proceed in lockstep. One woman is dead. Others are out of their homes after an apartment fire in Souris. Souris Fire Chief Chris Cooling says the building suffered severe smoke damage in Wednesday's fire. Spruce Woods MLA Grant Jackson says the Red Cross is assisting people who are displaced by the fire. While the Winnipeg Jets came alive in the third period in Anaheim.
They score! Morgan Barron picked up the puck in front, and this game is tied at 2.
Morgan Barron in the third period on TSN as the Jets double the Ducks 4-2. And while Winnipeg wins the game, the Jets lose Kyle Connor. He left the game after a knee-on-knee hit by the Ducks' Ryan Strome. Jets head coach Rick Bowness says Connor will be evaluated further today.
There's no other way of looking at it, and you hope it's suspendable. But the referees made the right call. 5-minute major and a game misconduct, and then we'll see where it goes from there.
The Jets now are first in the Central Division ahead of Colorado and Dallas, and Winnipeg next plays tomorrow in San Jose. You can find more news updated throughout the day. Just head to cbc.ca/Manitoba.
So that hit to Kyle Connor is a hit to the Jets, isn't it, Heather?
Oh, man, especially when you've got an elite player like Kyle Connor, who's one of the top scorers in the league, let alone on the team.
Oh, no. Okay, we're still going to do it. We're still going to go all the way, right?
Yeah, we're looking good.
Okay, good news. Thanks, Heather.
You're welcome.
That's Heather Wells from the CBC Newsroom. You're listening to Information Radio on CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM in Winnipeg. I'm Emily Brass, in this week for Marcy Markusa. Abby Adeyemi is our studio technician, and show director Pat Kanuga joins us right now with a look at the weather and traffic.
Good morning, everyone. Let's start off with a traffic note. Christina just gave us a call at 788-3093. Stalled semi westbound Canada Centerport Way. So that is right after the bridge. So when you're coming over the bridge, over the train bridge, you come down and then you see the stalled semi. It's 4 ways are on. A couple of cones are there, but it is a bit of a surprise, Christina said. So once again, that is Centerport Canada Way. Thank you for the call, Christina. 788-3093 once again is is the traffic line. In the weather, well, it's a pretty mild one once again. Right now in the city of Winnipeg, we're at a -7. We're going to get today to a daytime high of -2. Slight chance of flurries this morning, and we'll see a mix of sun and cloud this afternoon. Wind gust to 60 near noon from the northwest with that high of -2. It's going to be a blustery one out there. Right now, a lot of cloud cover over a good chunk of the province, looking at satellite imagery right now, and Winnipeg is quite cloudy as well. We will get to that -2 today, -13 tonight, which sounds cold, but then tomorrow -7, and then, get this, folks, Wednesday, 0, Thursday, 5. That's not a -5.
What?
That's a +5, yes. Friday, a -2. And into next weekend, already a -3 and a -7. So you can see the trend here is these minus single digits, other than the 5 on Thursday. No deep freeze. Overnight lows, we're looking at, again, -13 tonight, -14 Tuesday. We'll have a 0 overnight low into Thursday. But again, it's quite something for this time of year when the average daytime high, as I turn my page here, is usually a -9 for a daytime high, a -19 overnight. So at that -7, you can see we're very much above that. Sunrise is at 8:16. Sunset is at 4:27. I'll mention Brandon here quickly. -10 mist on the way to a -4. Clearing skies this morning. Tonight, -16. Tomorrow, sunny and -7. And Thompson, good morning, Thompson, -7. Light snow, maybe a couple of centimeters this morning, a high of -6 today. -20 tonight. Gusty winds to 50 tomorrow, a high of -17 and cloudy skies. We're looking at -2s and -3s for the following locations today. Emily, -8 in Gimli right now. Morden Winkler's -6. Melitta's -11. Whiteshell is -8. Dauphin Parkland is -3. So -2s and -3s in all those locations. Once again, we are -7 in the city of Winnipeg.
Thank you very much, Pat. I wonder how long it's going to take for the water to freeze over in all these places now. It's going to be a late start to the skating season, I think.
I think you're right. In fact, I tried to flood my home rink again yesterday, and it's going to be thwarted by that 5 on Friday.
No
on
kidding.
Thursday, yeah.
Okay. Thanks, Pat. That's CBC's Pat Kanuga. He's our show director, and he also joins us with the traffic and weather from time to time. Time now is 6:39, and we have a business report coming up with Crystalie Ramlakan. Good morning, Crystalie.
Good morning, Emily.
We've been following this story for the last couple of weeks, and now Panama's government is formally ordering a Canadian mining company to shut down its mine in that country. What are the details on that?
Yeah, so First Quantum Minerals is being told to end all operations at its $10 billion copper mine and to end extraction, processing, refining, transportation, export, and sales activities. So all of that. Now, the move follows a Supreme Court ruling that invalidated the law governing the company's operating license, and that the giant mine, has been at the center of these widespread protests that erupted over a decision to approve a new multi-decade operating contract in October. So people have had concerns there about the environmental impact of the open pit mine on the biodiverse area. And so First Quantum is now requesting permission from Panama's labor ministry to lay off more than 4,000 of the 7,000 employees at the site for, quote, justified economic reasons. And that the company says that some will remain, though, on site to maintain the safety of the facilities. But, Emily, this could also have an effect on the country's economy. The mine represents roughly 5% of the Panama's GDP.
Wow, that's a lot of job losses as well. Meanwhile, Amazon's alleging that an international ring tried to steal money through fraudulent refunds. What can you tell us about that?
Yes. So Amazon is accusing an international organization and several former employees of conspiring to steal millions of dollars of online products through fraudulent refunds. So the lawsuit alleges a group called REC is a large player in an underground industry of fraudsters who have created illegitimate businesses offering fraudulent returns to get expensive products for free. So the complaint says that REC marketed itself through social media channels like Reddit and Telegram as a paid service that allowed users to buy products from online retailers and then pretend to return them, keeping both the product and the refund. So Amazon says fraudulent refunds were issued for expensive items, including laptops, gaming consoles, and even a 24-karat gold coin. And that at least 7 former employees accepted thousands of dollars in bribes to process those returns. So the company says it detected this unusual product return activity and exposed the scheme by having an investigator pose as a rec user to purchase and then get a refund for an iPad without returning it. Now, Amazon is asking for financial restitution in this case and for the defendants to be barred from any affiliation with the company, including even shopping on Amazon.
Wow, your money's no good here anymore. And so why are people spending hundreds of dollars on dating apps these days?
Well, users say the free versions are now borderline unusable, and they're filled with these annoying ads. You have to, swipe past the ads and people that you are not interested, I guess, in. And, user growth is slowing down for these apps, and companies are trying to boost their revenue with these new paid premium services. And customers feel like they have to pay for them to actually get a chance at meeting someone. So more than a third of people who have used a dating website or an app have paid to do so at some point. And the average paying user spends around $19 a month. But some people are paying a lot more. So the league's VIP membership costs $999 a week, or I guess you can get a deal for $2,500 a month. It allows users to match with prospects in multiple cities, see new singles first, and use a concierge service that it says will help you win at this dating game. In September, Tinder rolled out a $499 monthly subscription, and Hinge recently introduced a $600 a month membership. And, though paying for love is not anything, paying to try to find love is not really anything new. I mean, in the past, people have paid for personal ads, speed dating, relationship coaches, and matchmakers.
Love's not cheap.
No, even though Jayla says love don't cost a thing, I think sometimes it might.
Sounds like it does. So what's happening in the market so far this morning?
So in Europe, markets are mixed as global investors look ahead to this week's U.S. Federal Reserve policy meeting. So right now, Germany is up, the UK is down, France is up. In Asia, stocks are on the rise after inflation data in China shows a faster than expected decline in consumer prices. So Japan is up, Shanghai is up, Hong Kong is down. Oil is down 51 cents to $70.73 U.S. per barrel. Gold is down $3 to $2,011.60 U.S. per ounce. And the dollar is flat at 73.62 cents U.S.
Thank you, Crystal Lee.
Thanks, Emily.
That was Crystal Lee Ramlakan with the business news. Good morning, Manitoba. It's coming up on 6:45, and you're listening to Information Radio on CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM in Winnipeg, worldwide on our CBC Manitoba YouTube page and on the CBC Listen app. I'm Emily Brass, filling in this week for Marcy Markusa. A new offering from fast food giant McDonald's is tapping into people's appetite for nostalgia. Starting today, the restaurant is offering adult Happy Meals. The food comes in a colorful box, just like the kids' version, and there's even a little plastic toy. All of this got CBC's Blair Sanderson thinking about the concept of kidulting. That term's become a popular way of describing the phenomenon of adults engaging in childish activities. Here's Blair's look at how businesses are tapping into this youthful trend.
Well, McDonald's is bringing back the adult Happy Meal, and it comes with toys.
That's right, a Happy Meal for adults.
There is plenty of buzz around the new McDonald's adult Happy Meal, and some are speculating this is an indication that grown-ups are secretly yearning to tap in to their inner child. There are plenty of other examples of this.
We're in Arizona's largest ball pit. All right, this is your childhood fantasies.
Over the past couple of years, adult-only ball pits have sprung up in cities across North America and Europe. Or how about this? A musical swing set that chimes as people glide into the air. There's one in Montreal, and adults just can't resist giving it a try.
It just makes like a really beautiful song, and that's so dope. Who doesn't want to be a kid again?
And let's not forget the recent craze of adult coloring books and paint-your-own pottery businesses.
People come in here. We have earthenware. Mugs are a favorite, of course.
Kelsey Matheson is the general manager of this pottery painting place in Halifax, where adults often outnumber the children.
Even if you haven't held a paintbrush since your childhood, you know how to hold it, and then you start using it, and you're like, oh, like this is fun, this feels good.
Matheson also talks about the need to access your inner child, which is not just psychological mumbo-jumbo.
Our inner child, our inner teen, or any other past monumental version of us, we carry with every day.
Dr. Shayna Ali is a mental health counselor who often prescribes more fun for her clients.
There's so much amazing literature on this. We know that there are some alarming rates of burnout, mental health concerns like anxiety and depression. And many times in my work, when I'm looking at someone's life, their overall lifestyle, their overall routines, I recognize this element of play is missing.
Of course, play can take many different forms. Art, sports, games, even splashing in a puddle will do. And Ali says the key is to become fully immersed in the activity, allowing yourself to enter what's often called a flow state, in which your attention is singularly focused on the task at hand. Now, this has been known for ages, but for some reason, when someone comes up with a clever new term for it, in this case, kidulting, people tend to view these concepts through a new lens. That's according to Tanya Fairhoff, who's a counselor and therapist who specializes in complex trauma.
Kidulting is, I kind of see it as a kitschy sort of thing where it gives us permission probably to do the things that we feel that we really want to do. And so if we can call it something and we can refer to it as a concept, then people can kind of say, okay, well, that kind of gives me permission to do the things that I really want to do that I don't know if other people might want to accept.
As for the new McDonald's adult Happy Meal, people online seem to love posting about it.
Morning, welcome to McDonald's. Can I take your order?
Can I have 2 adult Happy Meals? Can't remember the last time I had a kid's meal.
Oh.
We got a toy.
Okay.
Okay.
Hopefully we both got different toys.
First McDonald's, but who knows what other corporate entities will soon make a meal out of kidulting. For CBC Radio, I'm Blair Sanderson.
Well, in a media release issued last month, McDonald's did not specify which locations in Canada will feature the new Happy Meal for grown-ups. The box and toys were designed in collaboration with Kerwin Frost, who's a DJ, comedian, and talk show host in the United States.
It's not just how a story is told. It's about whose story it is to tell. It's not just playing what's new. It's setting the stage for what's next. It's not just about the game. It's bringing your game. It's not just trusted news. It's being where it matters because it matters. It's not how Canadian you are. It's who you are in Canada. It's not just one thing. CBC. It's a Canada thing.
Good morning. It's 10 minutes before 7 o'clock, and you're listening to Information Radio on CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM Winnipeg, worldwide on our CBC Manitoba YouTube page, and on the CBC Listen app. I'm Emily Brass, filling in this week for Marcy Markusa. Coming up on the next hour of the show, there are many reasons why people may feel down over the holidays. So we'll hear about a seminar for Manitobans who are experiencing grief and why grief doesn't take time off for the holidays. That's coming up after World Report. Right now it's -7 at the Forks, going up to a high of -2 today with a chance of flurries. Tonight, going down to -13. Again, a slight chance of flurries, about 30%. And it's going to be windy today and tonight. Tomorrow, -7 is the high with a mix of sun and cloud. Well, gift certificates might seem like a handy last-minute gift for your office Secret Santa or a good stocking stuffer for your spouse. Gift cards can be an easy option at holiday time, but we'll hear more about how they stack up and why retailers offer them. We're joined by Doug Stevens. He's the founder and chief executive officer of Retail Profit. Hi, Doug.
Hi, Emily.
So where did this idea that we should give gift cards instead of just giving money come from?
Yeah, great question. Gift cards, of course, have been around for decades, but the idea of a gift certificate is I guess culturally more acceptable than just stuffing cash in an envelope. At least it implies that you've given some thought or consideration to what somebody might enjoy or their interests. But the modern gift card economy, let's call it, sort of dates back to about 1994 when U.S. luxury retailer Neiman Marcus introduced what is considered to be the first gift card with a payment structure around it. So a gift card that you could actually use just like a credit card. And since that time, of course, other retailers, restaurants, gas stations have just piled on and grown the gift card category really into a significant product category all on its own.
So you've kind of given a hint there. How popular have gift cards become?
Pretty darn popular. Let's put it this way. It's about a $300 billion industry in North America. In Canada, that's about $3.5 billion each year that gets spent on gift cards. But it's really the growth factor that matters here. And since the pandemic, we've seen just, really an enormous growth in the category, about 5 to 8% a year, which is about double what the retail industry writ large is growing at. So, yeah, it's a significant category with significant growth.
So for retailers, what's the business argument in favor of gift cards?
Well, it does a few things. First of all, just purely from a consumer standpoint, for the consumer that may be undecided as to precisely what to get a family member, you're basically opening the door and you're saying, well, look, don't worry about it. Just give them the ability to buy what they want. So from a convenience standpoint, they really work. Now, from an accounting standpoint, this is where it gets rich. Think about it this way. As a retailer, you're getting cash in advance without having to relinquish any merchandise. So that's a great position to be in. You're earning money potentially on that revenue in the form of interest without even having to dip into your inventory and reciprocate. The other piece of this is that every year about 10 to 20% of all gift cards that are sold go completely unspent or unredeemed. And the industry refers to that as breakage. So that's a huge pickup if you're a retailer, just not having to redeem the full value of the cards that you're selling. And then we're even seeing now different retailers, gas bars, grocery stores, treating gift cards as a category unto itself, and so selling these things as impulse buys at the checkout. And we're even seeing new business formats grow up around gift cards where companies will now buy unused or unspent gift cards for a discount off the face value, and then they'll turn around and resell those cards also at a discount to other consumers. So it's become kind of an industry all on its own.
Wow. So now for the customers, what do people need to be cautious of when they buy gift cards?
Yeah, really good question. And there are some things to keep in mind. And I would put it in three categories. First of all, are there any limitations on what the card can actually be redeemed for? Are there any categories of goods or services that are excluded? That's important to know. The other thing is fees. Now, fees are rare, but they do apply to some cards. For example, prepaid credit cards often have an activation fee. So the $100 gift card, prepaid credit card you give someone may only be worth $85 or so by the time they pay that activation fee. That's also important to know. And then finally, expiry dates. Now, in various provinces that have legislation around these things, oftentimes they prohibit expiry dates on gift cards, but they do sometimes apply to things like spas or massages or salons. So again, you have to read the fine print, and it's also good to look at your provincial legislation around gift cards because that can be informative as well.
Okay, so just in this last minute, Doug, any advice for shoppers this holiday season looking for a last-minute gift, or are you saying a gift card is the way to go or not?
Well, you know what? I think the convenience is really fantastic, and they're very often well appreciated by the recipient. I would only say that in this economic climate where we know that certain retailers are a little shaky, you want to make sure that they are healthy before you buy a gift card, because these gift cards get treated as unsecured debt in the event of a bankruptcy, and they could become worthless. And the other alternative, let's just look at it from the other side of the coin here. The other alternative is to simply make a charitable donation on behalf of your friend or family member, and that way you're just saving plastic in the environment and you're also saving potential landfill.
Okay, a lot to think about there. Thanks so much, Doug.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
And happy holidays.
Thank you. You too.
Thank you. Doug Stevens is founder and CEO of Retail Profit. Just about 3 minutes before 7 o'clock, you're listening to Information Radio on CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM in Winnipeg. I'm Emily Brass, filling in this week for Marcy Markusa. And here's Heather Wells with a look at the news headlines.
Good morning. Well, a St. Teresa Point First Nation grandmother is joining a proposed class action lawsuit her community is launching against the federal government over the state of housing. Debbie Harper's house is full of mold. The ceilings caved in. 14 people are crammed into 3 bedrooms. She says it's unfair to the children and unfair to her. We'll hear more coming up. And a pro-Israel activist was arrested yesterday before an attempt to stage a counter-protest at the Canadian Museum for Human Rights. Ron East says he was charged with obstructing a police officer before the pro-Palestinian protest. We'll hear that story as well in our next local news at 7:30.
Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
That's Heather Wells from the CBC Newsroom. And joining me now in studio is our show director, Pat Kanuga, with a look at the traffic.
So Jake gave us a note on our CBC Manitoba YouTube page. Hopefully he pulled over to do this, but he said it's pretty greasy out there on the streets of Winnipeg. I found it okay this morning, but certainly side streets could be. Portage Avenue is pretty decent, so is Main, but do know it could be greasy out there. And I'll just want to mention again, there's a stalled semi on Centerport Canada Way, westbound. Just as you cross over the train bridge, there is a stalled semi on the right-hand side, so it kind of takes you by surprise. Its 4-ways are on as of about 25 minutes ago when Christina gave us a call, but do know that that could be an issue there, so take a look for it. 788-3093 is the traffic and commuter line.
Thank you, Pat.
Thank you.
Quick look at the weather for today. Cloudy, 30% chance of flurries this morning, becoming a mix of sun and cloud this afternoon, and pretty windy with some gusts up to 60 kilometers an hour around noon, a high of -2. Tonight, mainly cloudy, again a slight chance of flurries and windy, low -13. Then tomorrow, clearing in the morning, windy with a high of -7. Well, coming up on the next half hour of the show, we'll speak to a local pastor about the challenges the holidays present to people who are grieving. He'll also talk about ways to support others as they navigate grief this time of year. And he's a cheerful science teacher at a Winnipeg high school by day, but as soon as school's out, this teacher becomes a nonstop dancer. It's a story that'll give you happy feet. That's coming up on Information Radio. World Report's up next.
Is Canada. Rick Mercer spent 50 traveling across this country, followed by cameras doing everything from bungee jumping to chatting with prime ministers. He's here with stories about what it means to be Canadian, coming up on The Current.
The Current with Matt Galloway, this morning at 8:37, 9:07 in Newfoundland, and on the CBC Listen app.
This is World Report. Good morning from CBC News. I'm John Northcott. The House of Commons may no longer be bogged down in a marathon voting session, but Parliament is still very divided. And now it's deciding whether to dump the Speaker just weeks after he took over from another ousted Speaker. Greg Fergus is appearing before a parliamentary committee today. And Janice McGregor is following that from our Parliamentary Bureau. Good morning, Janice.
Good morning, John. You know, you would have seen last week how the Conservatives stood alone as they cast vote after vote after vote to oppose the government's spending plans. But on the issue of whether Greg Fergus needs to resign for taping a video tribute to a Liberal Party colleague while dressed in his House of Commons Speaker's robes, the Bloc Québécois agrees with the Conservatives, and there was actually cross-party agreement to punt the question of whether this should be a firing offence over to the Procedure and House Affairs Committee today. The swing vote could be the NDP. House Leader Peter Julian said Friday he was being seconded into that seat as Fergus appears this morning to explain himself and make his case to remain. The committee doesn't have very long to decide his fate.
When you look at the timelines, that means ultimately having to produce a report Tuesday night, because for translation and getting everything prepared so we can report to the House, timelines are very, very short.
When this video stirred up so much controversy a week ago, Fergus said he didn't realize it was going to be shown at the Ontario Liberal Party's leadership convention. He thought he was recording a more private and personal tribute for his longtime friend John Fraser, who'd been serving as the provincial party's interim leader. After MPs questioned Fergus for 2 hours this morning, they're calling 2 more witnesses who are in a position to fact-check that: the chief returning officer for the provincial convention and John Fraser himself. It was already exceptional for this parliament to have to replace 1 speaker earlier this fall. 2 in the course of 1 fall sitting would be unprecedented, adding to the chaotic atmosphere as the House of Commons kicks off what's supposed to be its final week before a restful winter break.
Janice McGregor in Ottawa. Thank you.
You're welcome.
A long-anticipated federal dental insurance plan is one step closer to reality. The program, aimed at providing benefits directly to eligible Canadians, is expected to be announced later this morning. The $13 billion benefit is one of the key initiatives the Liberals agreed to as part of a deal with the NDP. Families with a total income of under $90,000 a year without access to private insurance will have access to it. Coverage will expand to include kids under 18, as well as some seniors and people with disabilities. In Dubai,
we can't keep kicking the can down the road.
UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres is warning delegates they are nearly out of time. Talks at the COP28 climate summit getting down to the wire. Some 200 countries are gathered to try to come up with an agreement on new efforts to tackle climate change. But Guterres says the future of fossil fuels needs to be part of that agreement.
A central aspect, in my opinion, of the success of the COP would be for the COP to reach a consensus on the need to phase out fossil fuels in line with a time framework that is in line with the 1.5 degree limit.
He says that doesn't mean all countries have to phase out fossil fuels at the same time. The goal is to limit the rise of global temperatures to 1.5 degrees Celsius compared with pre-industrial times. The COP28 summit will wrap up tomorrow. Turning now to the Israel-Hamas war. Panic in the Jabalia refugee camp this morning as men work to extinguish a smoke bomb. The whole camp obscured by smoke, forcing some people to leave their shelters. Israel's military says people in the area attacked IDF troops with shoulder-fired missiles, adding it launched an airstrike back at them. Also reports Hezbollah launched 8 rockets from Lebanon towards Galilee. The Iron Dome defense system reportedly blocked 6 of them. The other 2 fell in open areas. Meanwhile, in Gaza's southern city of Han Yunis, there are reports Israeli tanks have reached the heart of the city after a night of intense fighting. In Quebec, 80,000 nurses across the province are not reporting to work this morning. Their union is launching a 4-day strike. It's the latest in a series of walkouts by public sector workers negotiating new contracts. Sarah Levitt has more.
There's a limit. That's the message Quebec's nurses union is sending the government as negotiations on a new contract stall. A limit to what they'll accept in terms of salaries and working conditions. So they're going on strike for the next 4 days. Nathalie Steak-Doucet is a nursing professor.
The strike hopefully will have the kind of impact where it's going to push the government to really look at which solutions are needed in healthcare. In the healthcare system.
The nurses are joining others on the picket line. Quebec public schools are closed again today and will be for the next 4 days. Different unions representing teachers are holding strike mandates at the same time. The unions for both teachers and healthcare workers say the government is showing a lack of urgency in getting deals done. José Fréchette is with a union representing healthcare technicians.
We're doing the work that is necessary to come to an agreement.
And that's the message we're also passing to the government.
For its part, the government says it's negotiating in good faith, but it needs the unions to be more flexible, particularly when it comes to schedules and overtime. The nurses' union has tabled a counteroffer and will call off the strike if accepted. Sarah Levitt, CBC News, Montreal.
A Winnipeg man wants answers after his frightening experience with a budget car rental. A major safety flaw had him and 2 children spinning out of control on a highway and ending up in a ditch. Go Public's Rosa Marcatelli has the story.
It was a really big deal.
When 12-year-old Sammy Wiley heard her favorite YouTube stars, the Sterniolo triplets, were performing live, her dad Norm agreed to drive her and a friend from Winnipeg to Minneapolis to see the show.
Tickets sold out in like 30 seconds.
He booked a vehicle from Budget Car Rental, wanting a newer and safer one than the one he owns. Soon after they hit the road, it started to rain.
Next thing you know, we're doing 360s down the highway. Girls are screaming, I'm screaming. We flew backwards into the ditch.
Grateful no one was hurt, Wiley parked the rental and borrowed his in-laws' vehicle to finish the trip. When he got back, a family member pointed out the lack of tire tread. So Norm took the rental to a tire specialist. The result? The back ones were so bald, the vehicle legally shouldn't have been on the road.
Completely inexcusable.
Wiley complained to Budget. The franchise owner told him he was already working to improve safety at the locations he owns. Jeff Orenstein is a consumer protection lawyer.
I mean, that's negligent. It's not good enough for them to say, we're trying our best.
George Inney from the Automobile Protection Association says the risk of unsafe rentals is higher these days because the recent vehicle shortage is keeping cars in circulation longer.
These vehicles are going to need more maintenance and probably a more robust inspection program.
Go Public asked Budget for its safety and maintenance policies for all of its locations. We never got them. Rosa Marcatelli, CBC News, Calgary.
And finally, an Ottawa area woman is waiting on the results of a court case this week to find out if the man accused of killing her daughter, Summer, can be held criminally responsible. Making the experience more traumatic, Carrie Boudreau lost a daughter before. 13 years ago, her daughter Ashley was killed in a domestic dispute. Boudreau shares her story with the CBC's Christy Neese.
There's that picture I was telling you about. She was crawling and she was...
Looking through photos with her grandkids in her living room, Carrie Boudreau's voice is full of life.
Oh, my word, yes. Batman. Just making funny faces. I could never get her to do a good picture with me.
But when it's time to discuss the killings of her 2 daughters more than a decade apart, all that brightness drains away.
What's really gotten to me for both my girls is seeing their name and their death date written down somewhere. That's when you know it's final. They're not coming back.
She's talking about a stone monument next to a river in eastern Ontario, honoring women killed by men. Her daughter Ashley's name was added more than a decade ago when her partner killed her and then himself. In the years after, Carrie and Summer would celebrate Ashley's birthdays at the stone. Now Summer's name is carved into it too.
How does lightning strike twice in one place and be so brutal twice?
Summer's daughter Tia Boudreau gave birth to twins a month after her mother was killed. She somehow forgives the accused killer.
But not for him, for me, because I know that if he's in my mind all the time, eating at my thoughts, then he wins.
On Friday, there'll be a Superior Court hearing to determine whether Adam Rossi is not criminally responsible due to mental disorder. Summer's son, Tayi Boudreau, looks to his grandmother for strength.
I feel bad, but as long as she keeps pushing, we all got this and we'll get through it.
Christy Neese, CBC News, Ottawa.
I'm John Northcott. This is CBC News.
Good morning, Manitoba. You're listening to Information Radio on CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM in Winnipeg. I'm Emily Brass, filling in this week for Marcy Markusa. Here's a look at what's coming up on the show. By day, he's a cheerful science teacher at a Winnipeg high school, but as soon as school's out, that teacher becomes a nonstop dancer. It's a story that'll give you happy feet. That's coming up a bit later in the hour. With multiple generations under one roof, many St. Teresa Point First Nation families are desperate for living space. CBC's Aaron Broman spoke to some of those families during a recent trip to the remote First Nation. That's coming up later in the hour. But first, we'll speak to a local pastor about the challenges the holidays present to people who are grieving. And he'll also talk about ways to support others as they navigate grief this time of year. But right now, time is 7:11. Time for news headlines with Heather Wells.
Good morning. Well, some patients are on hold and in pain after the new Manitoba government cancelled out-of-province surgeries last month. Myron Karaluk can barely walk without feeling exhausted. He's waiting on surgery to help with severe spinal stenosis. He thought going to the United States would let him book his surgery earlier, but now that option is gone. We're going to hear from him coming up. As well, True North Real Estate Development and the Southern Chiefs Organization plan to work together to redevelop downtown Winnipeg. Sources tell CBC News True North and the Southern Chiefs will sign an agreement tomorrow. We'll hear more in our next local news at 7:30.
Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
That's CBC's Heather Wells. And right now, Pat Kanuga joins us with a look at the traffic.
It could be a little greasy out there on the streets of Winnipeg this morning, especially on the side streets. My drive coming in on Main and onto Portage was okay, but we're hearing that some side streets could be a little bit greasy. Also, about 45 minutes ago, got a call from Christina about a stalled semi westbound Centerport Canada Way right after you cross over the train bridge. It kind of surprises you. So the four ways were on and a couple of cones as well. If you're in the area and it's safe to do so, please update us on that if you could, or anything else that's happening on the streets of Winnipeg or the highways of Manitoba. 788-3093 is the traffic line. Now with a look at Winnipeg's forecast, here is Abby Adiemi.
Good morning once again, Pat. Currently in Winnipeg, we are at -6. It's going to be a cloudy day, 30% chance of flurries this morning. And then it's going to be becoming a mix of sun and cloud later as you ease into your lunch hour. The high of today will be for -1. And the wind chill, we need to talk about the wind chill this morning. It's going to feel like -16 this morning as you head out for your daily commute. And later in the afternoon, it's going to drop to -10. Tonight will be mainly cloudy with 30% chance of flurries also. And we'll be dropping to a low of -13. So it's going to be pretty chilly this evening as the wind chill will be feeling like -14. And then overnight, it's going to drop down to -23. If you have any update for us in traffic, feel free, let us know, 788-3093.
Good morning. It's 13 minutes past 7 o'clock, and you're listening to Information Radio on CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM in Winnipeg. I'm Emily Brass, filling in for Marcy Markusa. Well, for some, it's the most wonderful time of the year. For others, the holidays can be difficult and painful. Palliative Manitoba hosts monthly seminars for Manitobans dealing with grief. This month's seminar is called Getting Through the Holidays. Sean Sager is a local pastor and funeral celebrant who's leading the seminar. He hopes to help people navigate the sorrow some may face this holiday season. Good morning, Sean.
Good morning, Emily.
So why can the holidays be so difficult for those who've lost a loved one?
I think the holidays, especially the Christmas season, can be such a difficult time of year for people who are grieving the loss of a loved one, because it's one of those very important celebrations in our lives that everybody around us seems to be focused upon.
And we have traditions, I guess, that are tied in sometimes with our loved ones.
Yes, absolutely. Sometimes it's very hard for us to navigate those special traditions when one of the most important persons of our family unit is no longer there to celebrate together with us.
So what kind of emotions might be brought up for people who are mourning during the holidays?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think it's a mixture of emotions, right? I think that grief is many times can be quite complicated, right? Like, it's not just about sadness. There's also some joy as we think about some of the cherished memories that we have of our loved ones. And so, grief can include tears. It can also include some laughter as we think of some of those happy moments. But but that's all kind of confusing for people to navigate, especially, they talk about that first year being challenging and being the most difficult. And I think that in part it's because we're navigating these seemingly conflicting emotions at times.
Yeah, and of course people deal with grief differently. Some might seem like they're okay, but are they sometimes just suppressing their feelings?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's hard to navigate how one is feeling, and sometimes we don't necessarily feel the support from those around us. We feel like we have to meet other people's expectations when we are grieving. We think that other people are hoping that we're going to be okay, and so sometimes we want to project that we are okay. And so I think that's can be really hard and difficult for people.
So, do you have tips or tools for people who might be trying to do what you just described, or, are just trying to get through the holidays if they're in mourning?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that there's a saying that people often call upon. It's okay not to be okay. And I think that especially applies to people who are grieving the loss of a loved one. I think that don't feel like you have to meet other people's expectations about how they think that you should be doing. I think it's very much okay for you to take stock about how you are feeling and how you are doing, and then make some choices around that. Like it's okay to take time for yourselves. It's okay to say to friends and family, you know what, I'm going to sit this one out. Like I just need some time just to kind of navigate this myself. And it's okay for us to give ourselves permission to grieve the ways in which we want to grieve, because not everybody grieves the same way. And that too is okay.
Yeah. And like you mentioned, some people are watching the person in mourning and, wishing they'd be doing better and trying to cheer them up. But how can people who aren't grieving really support those that are during this time of year?
Yeah, I think it's very important for those of us who are helping, family or friends who are navigating the loss of a loved one to be sensitive and to ask some questions. I think that when we observe people who are grieving, we feel, I don't want to ask them about the person that they're grieving the loss of because that may set them off. No, I think the opposite is true. I think that we should take advantage of those moments to say, hey, like, how are you feeling right now? Like, talk to me about your loved one. Like, what is some of your cherished memories about your loved one at this time? And I've often been so surprised that when you ask somebody about their loved one, their face will often light up because they're looking for an opportunity to talk about how their loved one has made a difference and an impact in their lives and in the lives of others, especially around the special occasions of life.
So you're kind of giving them space to honor that loved one.
Absolutely. I think that's so crucially important. Like we really need to take advantage of the opportunities that we have around us to share the memories that we have of our loved one, to be given permission to speak their name can be such a powerful thing.
Wow. So this sounds like a really interesting seminar and probably really helpful for people who are grieving. How did you get involved with it?
Oh, that's a long story, Emily. I'm a pastor at Grant Memorial Church, but I'm also a funeral celebrant at Chapel Lawn. And this one time, the person who was supposed to be leading the grief seminar wasn't able to make it, so they called me in at the last moment, and that's how I got connected with Palliative Manitoba, such a great organization. I'm just so glad that Palliative Manitoba is on the front lines of giving help and support to people who are navigating grief and so many other challenging times.
Well, I'm sure they were glad you were in the wings there to help out. Thanks so much, Sean.
Oh, you're most welcome.
Sean Sagert is leading Palliative Manitoba's Getting Through the Holidays seminar. It's happening tomorrow at noon at Chapel Lawn Funeral Home.
There are stories you just can't stop thinking about. They take you somewhere, they introduce you to someone, they share something new with you. Lift off. Those are the stories you want to share with your friends, and CBC's award-winning documentary team is bringing them to you every week on Storylines. Storylines, new this season on CBC Radio 1 and always on demand on the CBC Listen app. Everybody knows a turkey and some mistletoe help to make the season bright. But singing along to Yuletide classics and new holiday favorites is what really makes the holly jolly.
Well,
CBC
the
Music
fan in me,
unwraps
Mark,
the
here's
gift
the name
of holiday
Shohei Ohtani right
playlists
now. I just
to
don't
get
even
you
want to
into the
talk about
festive
it.
spirit. From pop to jazz, gospel, folk, blues, classical, country, and so many more. Now available on the CBC Listen app.
Good morning, it's 7:20 and you're listening to Information Radio on CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM in Winnipeg. I'm Emily Brass, in this week for Marcy Markusa. Time now for a little holiday music, get us in the spirit. A bouncy, snappy Saturday Night at the Sands take on Bing Crosby's classic, and it's a delightful taste of time travel in the form of a jazz standard. It's Montreal-based jazz pop singer Nicole Rachel, a.k.a. Nikki Yanofsky, and she has a jazzy tune for you. Here she is with Marshmallow World. Martin or Bing Crosby. That was Marshmallow World. Time now is 7:24. You're listening to Information Radio on CBC Radio 1. I'm Emily Brass, and it's time now for a look at the sports. Scott Reguer joins us with the CBC Sports Report. Good morning, Scott.
Hey there, Emily.
How are you today? Getting ready for the holidays?
Yeah, partial denial still.
Yeah.
You know, we still have 2 more weeks, right? 2 weeks today, I think.
Those weeks go by quickly, Scott. Beware.
Oh, I know.
So tell us what's up in the sports world today.
Well, a lot of good things coming out of a win for the Jets last night over the Ducks. 4-2 was the final in that one. Gabe Vilardi got his first goal as a Jet. That was the game winner. Connor Hellebuck put another top performance. And the team as a whole, Emily, fought back to get the win despite being down multiple goals in the final period. However, not all was great about this game. Seconds into the second period, Kyle Connor was hit knee-on-knee by Anaheim's Ryan Strom and needed to be helped off the ice. Strom was assessed with a 5-minute major for the hit and ejected from the game. Speaking after the game, head coach Rick Bowness did not give an update on Connor's status, but did say he hopes there will be further discipline handed out against Strome.
Well, it's a knee on knee. He sticks his knee out. There's no other way of looking at it, and you hope it's suspendable. But the referees made the right call. 5-minute major and a game misconduct, and then we'll see where it goes from there.
The NHL's Department of Player Safety, Emily, has yet to issue a statement on whether Strome will be suspended or not. Jets fans might remember a couple of years ago when Neil Pionk was suspended for a couple of games for throwing a similar hit. Winnipeg, now sitting first in their division, will continue their California road trip tomorrow against the LA Kings.
Thank you. Okay, so for a while it looked like the Blue Jays were going to sign the world's best player since Shohei Ohtani. Then the weekend happened. What are your thoughts on what took place?
Well, Emily, the fan of me hears the name Shohei Ohtani right now and doesn't even want to talk about it. Like everyone else, I let myself go to a place where I was penciling him into the Jays' batting order and pitching rotation for the next decade. He was the ultimate Christmas gift arriving early, but then the Dodgers decided they'd be the ones playing Santa Claus for their fans. Many are now questioning, Emily, whether Ohtani was always going to choose L.A. in free agency and that the Jays were simply being used as financial leverage to get L.A. To pay the top dollar. And that case is compelling. Baseball insider John Morosi suggested on Friday Ohtani was on a plane to Toronto and that a deal was imminent. Cue the internet frenzy. But it wasn't Ohtani on that rare Anaheim to Toronto charter flight. It was Robert Herjavec from the show Dragon's Den. So was this a setup? After all, Herjavec and Ohtani are both represented by the same agency. Things began picking up steam again on Saturday when a Dodgers beat writer said Ohtani was on the cusp of a contract with the Jays. And then, out of nowhere, a couple hours later, we learned, nope, he's going to sign with L.A. This felt like Kawhi Leonard all over again, and it partly just felt surreal, Emily. After all, this richest deal in North American pro sports history will pay Shohei Ohtani $4,000 a minute.
What?
Every minute of every day for the next decade. Can you imagine? Trying to fathom that's almost as challenging as trying to fathom what the Jays are going to do next, trying to make lemonade out of this sourest of lemons. We may have gotten a glimpse on social media last night. Slugger Cody Bellinger's girlfriend posted a photo of the CN Tower on her Instagram account. Oh. It's way too soon. It's just too soon for all that.
Oh,
I can't. No more media, social media speculation. It's killing me.
You'll have to hold out a little longer.
Uh-huh.
Meanwhile, the Northern Star Award given to Canada's Athlete of the Year will be announced today. Who do you think will win it, Scott?
Well, there's some pretty compelling candidates here. You look at Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. He plays for the Oklahoma City Thunder in the NBA. He's had the best season in that league by a Canadian since Steve Nash was around. Alexander also led Canada to the Olympic Games, first time we will be there since 2000. You have Summer McIntosh, the swimming phenom, who won 4 medals at the World Championships, 2 of them gold. But I think, Emily, it's going to be a Winnipeg-born athlete that takes home the Northern Star Award today. Remember this?
Left the flag stick in with the maple leaf flag. Good pace. Are you serious? Oh, my goodness! Glorious and free!
Ooh, what was that?
Taylor.
Nick Taylor.
Sinking a 72-foot putt at the Canadian Open this summer and thus becoming the first Canadian man to win the National Golf Championship in 69 years. Will it be enough to win Athlete of the Year for this country? The Northern Star Award, we'll see later today.
How often do golfers win that award?
Last was Mike Weir, I think, in 2003 after he won the Masters. They don't win it very often.
Wow.
But you know what? The sports writers who determine this award, a lot of them like to golf in their off season. So just saying, that could help inform things too.
Yes, no kidding. Well, thanks so much, Scott.
You betcha.
That's Scott Regehr, who was joining us from the CBC Sports Desk. Time now is just before 7:30. We're coming up on news headlines, and after the news break, we'll be hearing about the latest in our special series of stories produced by students through Sisler High School's Create program. That's all coming up after the news.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. At 7:30, it is -6 in downtown Winnipeg. It's going to get windy today, becoming northwest 40, gusting to 60 around noon. Mix of sun and clouds and a high of -2. Some Manitobans are feeling left in the lurch after the NDP government cancelled the out-of-province surgeries which had been arranged by the surgical task force created by the former PC government. Myron Caroluk can barely walk without feeling exhausted. He's waiting on surgery to help with severe spinal stenosis. He thought he was going to the United States, and he thought that would let him book his surgery earlier.
We had some hope, in fact, that we could get surgery done in Fargo. And now with the new government canceling all of that, that's a sinking feeling. Like it's just, what do we do?
Health Minister Uzoma Asseguera says patients going out of province for treatment is not best practice. The PCs argue more staff should have been hired in the public health care system before cancelling out-of-province surgeries. It was a day of more protests in Winnipeg. Pro-Palestinian supporters rallying on the grounds of and inside the Canadian Museum for Human Rights, lying down in the building representing those who have died in the ongoing war between Israel and Hamas. Ramsey Zeid at the Canadian Palestinian Association of Manitoba says the museum needs to show more awareness of his community.
Let the Human Rights Museum know that they need to have something in the museum that recognizes Palestine.
Over on Portage Avenue, outside CBC, pro-Israel supporters calling for the release of hostages being held by Hamas in Gaza. Roman Lisak used to live in Israel. Lisak wants the hostages to know they are supported even far away in Canada.
Make sure the hostages see our support here. Like even in wintertime, we come here because we really care what happened.
Now, a pro-Israel activist was arrested yesterday before an attempt to stage a counter-protest at the Canadian Museum for Human Rights. Ron East says he was charged with obstructing a police officer before the pro-Palestinian protest. East says he was in a no-parking zone and an officer asked him to move. He says the officer asked for his driver's license, which he refused to give without knowing why. East says he was told if he didn't provide it, he would be arrested.
Handcuffed, thrown in the back of the police car, taken into the big police station, searched, stripped of all my clothing, taken upstairs, going through the whole routine as if I'm some kind of a criminal, thrown into a cell jail, come out, pictures, fingerprinting, the whole 9 yards.
CBC News has reached out to Winnipeg Police but has not yet received comment. A St. Teresa Point First Nation grandmother is joining a proposed class action lawsuit her community's launching against the federal government over the state of housing. Debbie Harper's house is full of mold. The ceiling is caved in. 14 people are crammed into the 3-bedroom house. Harper's adult son has epilepsy. He had to build himself a shack in the backyard. She says the overcrowding and noise often trigger seizures.
We have a right to stay in our community. If we live in the city, we're going to be in the streets. At least we have a home, but it's not suitable for us. It's not fair for our children, and it's not fair for my grandchildren, and it's not fair for me.
The chief of the community of about 4,000 says they need about 300 homes. You can hear more on this story in the next half hour here on Information Radio. True North Real Estate Development and the Southern Chiefs Organization plan to work together to redevelop downtown Winnipeg. Sources tell CBC News True North and the Southern Chiefs plan to sign an agreement tomorrow. Celebrating 100 years. Family Family and friends packed the Caboto Center yesterday, marking Antoinetta Lamoco's 100th birthday. Lamoco still works 3 days a week at her son's Sorrento pizza restaurant in the center. She makes pizza and pasta as she has done for decades. Her son, Jerry, translates for her. She describes her secret to long life.
Halloween. Some wine, good food. She only has 2 meals a day, and she's always done that. Breakfast and supper. No snacking and nothing in between. And I keep saying, a nice glass of wine every night.
And she says she continues to work in the restaurant because it keeps her connected with her family and the Italian community. Well, a win and a loss for the Winnipeg Jets in Anaheim.
Shoots it, simply score! And it's Gabriel Velarde's first goal as a Jet.
Gabe Velarde in the third period on TSN as the Jets score 4 unanswered goals in the third to beat the Ducks 4-2 last night. And while Winnipeg wins the game, the Jets lose Kyle Connor. He left the game after a knee-on-knee hit by the Ducks' Ryan Strome. And after that hit, teammate Mark Scheifele went after Strome.
Definitely didn't like the hit, and to see Casey down like that, he doesn't wince like that very often, and to see him go down like that, you have to get in there, and I know a lot of guys, every guy in this room would do that for each and every one of us.
Kyle Connor will be reassessed today. The Jets are now first in the Central Division ahead of Colorado and Dallas. Winnipeg next plays tomorrow in San Jose. You can find more news updated throughout the day at cbc.ca/Manitoba.
Thanks very much, Heather.
You're welcome.
That's Heather Wells from the CBC Newsroom. You're listening to Information Radio. I'm Emily Brass, filling in this week for Marcy Markusa. Abby Adiemi is our studio technician, and our show director, Pat Kanuga, is joining us now with a look at the weather and traffic.
Good morning once again.
I want to comment on that story about the pizza.
The pizza, okay.
I wish I could taste it. I can just picture this 100-year-old Italian grandma making the pizza with love. I bet it tastes amazing.
Well, if she makes the pizza, she probably eats the pizza, so I'm buoyed by that. So
exactly.
I eat lots of pizza. Here I thought it's going to not add to my longevity, but maybe it will.
Yeah.
So that's good news. I'll take it as good news this morning.
Well, it's obviously not hurting her too much. I think it's helping her. Maybe it's all that kneading, all that exercise.
It's the exercise, sure.
Okay, so how about people who are not getting much exercise out there in their cars in the traffic?
Well, let's start with traffic here. So a couple things to tell you about. First off, I must tell you, so being on our CBC Manitoba YouTube account, YouTube channel, people are watching us and they get to chat. So Kathy Pelche wished you, she said, have a great week.
Oh, nice.
Okay, so when I get comments,
Kathy.
oh, so that's what you look like. So it's kind of a disappointment. So Cindy Pelche is wishing you a great week. So thank you, Cindy. Yeah, you can join the chat on our CBC Manitoba YouTube channel as we are on live from 5:57 till 8:37. I'll just mention traffic here quickly. So a couple of things. Southbound Gary between Portage and Graham, there is some road work going on in the median and middle lanes, and eastbound Selkirk from Van Horn to McPhillip, Selkirk Avenue, curb lane, there's some sewer work happening. So that's a couple of construction things, but it could be a little greasy out there with the temperatures that we had. I certainly had some slippery highways and streets yesterday where I was driving, and we got a couple of calls saying that there could be some greasy side streets. So no reports of stalls or crashes at this point, but if you do see something out there, let us know. 788-3093 is the traffic and commuter line. As far as the weather goes, the warmth continues. We're at a -6 right now in the city of Winnipeg. We're on the way to a -2, and we're going to see mostly cloudy skies. Could see a few flurries this morning, and we'll see a mix of sun and cloud near noon. Wind gusts to 60, though, from the northwest by noon with that -2. Tonight, dipping down to a -13. Tomorrow, we're going to have a mix of sun and cloud of -7. Wednesday, 0 and sunny. Thursday, 5 and sunny. Some of that snow from Friday evening will be melting by Friday, a -2 and clouds. Over in Brandon, -11 right now on the way to a -4. Clearing skies this morning. Starting to clear already looking at satellite images. More clouds east of Brandon than west of Brandon, so that's starting to clear. You'll have some sunshine when it rises this morning around 8:16. And tonight dipping down to a -16, a chilly one, and tomorrow mainly sunny and a high of -7. In Thompson, good morning, up Highway 6, -7, some light snow, a couple of centimeters kicking around today. Gusty winds to 50 this morning from the west, a high of -6. Tonight, periods of light snow ending overnight, and it'll be cloudy, and we'll have an overnight low of -20, a chilly one. And tomorrow, though, only a -17 for a daytime high after today's -6. Looking at -2s and 3s for the most part in much of the province. Pilot Mound, you're -9. Dauphin is -3. Steinbach -7. Verdun -11. And Pinawa -8. Once again, we're at -6 degrees in the city of Winnipeg.
Thank you so much,
Thank you.
Pat. I wonder, all this up and down with the weather, what the holidays are going to look like.
We will see. I'm going to check the 14-day forecast and see what the trend is looking like. So I'll get back to you about that next
Okay, I think
hour.
a lot of people want to know what Santa's journey is going to be like.
That's true.
So we appreciate that. Thank you, Pat. Time now is 7:39. You're listening to Information Radio on CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM in Winnipeg. Also heard worldwide on the CBC Listen app and on our CBC Manitoba YouTube channel. Good morning to everyone. Well, now for the latest in our special series produced by a team of aspiring filmmakers here in Winnipeg. They're all high school grads taking part in Create. That's an entertainment arts training program at Sisler High School. Their goal? To produce stories about their community. And with the help of CBC Manitoba, they're doing just that. Today, students Cyril Zamora, Laura Marie Karangdang, Jazzy Galachera, and Tyra Plaga tell us a story that's bound to give you happy feet. It's about a Winnipeg high school educator who juggles his love of teaching with his passion for dancing. Here's his story.
Sometimes as a teacher, we can't always be our authentic selves. But one thing I feel when I'm dancing is I get to show the world who Rolly really is. My name is Rolly Layson. I'm a grade 9 science and math teacher, and my hobby, dance. I got into teaching both math and science when I realized that becoming a doctor wasn't for me. How was your weekend out of 10? But I didn't want to lose all the science and math that I was studying, and I realized I've always done teaching. And that was the way I could connect my science and my math to something that I love doing, which is helping people through teaching. I started dancing when I was 4. And growing up, being Filipino, it's been part of my exposure. Whenever there's a party, an event, my aunts, my parents would always bring me to different parties. What I love about dance is that it allows me to explore different feelings, different characters, to express how I feel, the creativity that I have. The types of dances that I do are hip-hop, soul dances from the 70s, salsa, bachata, kizomba, hustle and locking, and right now, house. One of my goals, if I could, would be to have my own studio, a space where I can bring people together in a place where people can really explore who they are and meet other people. Pretty well. Just had a dance class at lunch. Teaching it's really what pays the bills, but at the same time, it's dance that really keeps me sane. It's sort of like my dance therapy. So the conflict is, finding time to do your job, but also finding time to not only feed your pocket, but find ways to really feed your soul. See that? Oh, that's too big. Okay, come on. And I think when I look at my goals as a teacher, it's how do I create a structure, but also how do I freestyle within the structure. And I think house helps me achieve that goal of one day hopefully having a studio that allows people to be themselves within a structure, but also explore. I definitely was able to combine the two. In fact, I'm now teaching the dance program here. Try and get to your body. Again, we only have less than 30 minutes.
Having Mr. Layson as a teacher is really fun. He's a very authentic person. He's really well-rounded, and he always has stories to tell.
He can do both things really well, like academics and dance. So if I would have a question about math, I can go to him. If I have a question about how to do a certain move, I can go to him. He can really guide me in different situations. So I think he's a great teacher.
So for me, dance and teaching has definitely combined, and it's putting me closer to make my goal of being a dance teacher within this community more and more of a reality. My message has to be, try to understand the language of your passion. Because I think when you do, you really learn to feed your soul, you really learn how to love yourself, and you can allow to be yourself as authentically as possible.
I can kind of see how being a math teacher would help you as a dancer. 1, 2, 3, 4. That was Maple's collegiate teacher, Rolly Lawson, with students Cheryl Sandhu and Ishwin Rana. His story was produced by students enrolled in the Sisler Create program, and it really makes me want to see Rolly's moves. For more, you can go to our website at cbc.ca/Manitoba or tune in on TV tonight on the CBC News at 6. Good morning, Manitoba. It's coming up on 7:45, and you're listening to Information Radio on CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM in Winnipeg. I'm Emily Brass. Well, according to the latest OECD rankings released last week, Canada's overall math scores are in steep decline. The news is pushing parents and students to question their attitudes towards the subject. Cross Country Checkup asked callers yesterday, why are your kids struggling in math, and is it time to rethink how we teach it? Here's what some of the callers shared with Ian Hanukkah.
I didn't come out of high school with the strongest in math. I was taught in math, throwing a slide up on the board, telling you this is how it is, giving 1 or 2 practice questions, and then class is done, and I'm sent home to do it by myself. And that got me nowhere in high school. I barely passed grade 10 math, and quite frankly, one of the only reasons I did was because we were in Ontario, and I was thankful enough that my grade couldn't drop after the pandemic had hit. And I do have to give credit where it's due. My high school teachers were dedicated to trying to help me learn. Like, they would stay in their lunch, they would take it off, and they would sit down and help me and 3 other students, but it would never click. So again, that leads me back to everyone's brain is different. So how can we try to adapt the classes, maybe smaller class sizes, to be able to adapt to these different kids and their needs?
I see you're in grade 10. How's it going?
It's going. I'm lucky I don't have math this semester. I historically haven't been the best math student, but I got an incredible grade 9 math grade. At least for me personally, I got an 88. I mean, even if you don't like math and don't think you'll use it, it's still important because it challenges your brain. It encourages you to problem solve, look at things from all different angles, even if you aren't going to use it later in life. And it gets better. Different math teachers have different ways of teaching things.
I unfortunately didn't get to finish high school because of some serious mental health issues. But then when I got older and my mental health struggles weren't as prominent in my life, I was able to go back. Sorry if you can hear my cat. And so when I got into an adult learning center, my teacher actually helped me relate stuff like calculating wavelengths to biology and physics, which I did have an interest in. And I went from getting a 51 in math to a 91.
Wow, well done. Those were callers on Cross Country Checkup yesterday with Ian Hanukkah, and they were responding to the questions, why are your kids struggling in math, and is it time to rethink how we teach it? You can download the Checkup podcast on the CBC Listen app or at cbc.ca/checkup.
Ever hear a really good radio show and fall in love right away? Fall in love at first listen with the CBC Listen app. Find CBC radio shows like As It Happens and Now or Never and stream them anytime, anywhere for free. Download CBC Listen today.
It's 7:47 and -6 at the Forks. You're listening to Information Radio on CBC Radio 1. I'm Emily Brass. 24 family members living in a 5-bedroom house. That's the reality for Christina Wood, who lives in St. Teresa Point First Nation. The housing situation there is so bad, the community is preparing a class action lawsuit against the federal government. St. Teresa Point is one of the 4 isolated island lake communities in Manitoba, roughly 475 kilometers northeast of Winnipeg. CBC's Erin Broman recently told me about her visit to Christina's home. So tell us about Christina.
Christina Wood is a grandmother who shares her home with all of her kids and all of her grandkids. She's one of 3 grandmothers that we visited last month in St. Teresa Point First Nation. They invited us into their homes because they wanted to share what it's like to live in really overcrowded conditions and inadequate housing. All 3 of these women are remarkable. They're trying to do the best for their families with what they've got, but it's hard. Here she is, taking me on a tour of her house.
There's me. I live here with my children and my grandchildren. I have 6 children here and 16 grandchildren and 1 son-in-law. So we're crowded. It's hectic, especially in the mornings. They get up to go to school. They go to the washroom one by one. I only have 1 washroom, and that's where they change their clothes to get ready for school. I have 5 bedrooms. It's really small bedrooms, and they sleep in the living room. 3 twin beds we pull out in the living room on the floor. There's no houses for them to move to. I need a big house. 10-bedroom house.
That sounds really crowded. That must be pretty hard. How common is their situation?
It's very, very common. Most people we spoke to in St. Teresa Point First Nation are living with multiple generations under one roof. I spoke to the chief, Raymond Flett, and quoted some federal stats to him that say 1 in 5 First Nations people in Canada live in overcrowded housing. He said in St. Teresa Point, that's 6 in 5. There are just over 600 homes there. 150 are in need of major repairs, and 150 have severe mold issues. And if you thought Christina had a challenging situation, imagine raising a child with a disability in something like that, with a perpetually overflowing septic tank. That's what Frida McDougall was dealing with.
Yeah, my son, Eric. He's 22 and he's diagnosed with Angelman syndrome. It has its challenges. Whenever he would have a soiled mattress, we would put it outside. We had 5 mattresses. It's like basically a mattress for every month. But we have a septic tank, so I'm constantly doing laundry. I have to bathe him, I have to clean him, and it overflows. And it's not like every day that they can come and pick up the sewage, because there's a lot of people on the reserve who have the tanks as well. It's overwhelming, it gets tiring, I get really frustrated.
The overflowing septic tank is a symptom of a house that's designed for fewer people. So that was a common situation we saw too. They're just not able to handle a family of 13. Coupled with that, there's also 1 septic truck on the reserve. And because it's in such high demand, it breaks down all the time. So they're constantly running behind on emptying the tanks.
Sounds terrible. So tell us more about this class action lawsuit.
So the substandard living conditions are the basis of the proposed class action that's being filed by McCarthy Tatro LLP and OKT. Both of those are Toronto law firms. The class action concerns the federal government's failure, alleges the federal government's failure to provide adequate housing and to address the housing crisis. The plaintiffs are both St. Teresa Point First Nation and Sandy Lake First Nation in Ontario. I spoke with Rachel Chan with McCarthy Tatro, and she was actually up in St. Teresa Point while we were there.
Their homes, they're filled with mold, there's pest infestations, there's water leaking, we've got roofs that are caving in, and these houses are in need of major repairs. And we've also got, we met with members of the community where there's 30 people living in a 3-bedroom home with 1 bathroom. And it's exceptionally difficult to keep them warm, especially given the high cost of hydro. These are people who are living in really deplorable conditions that, they're trying their best to provide for their families. And it's not acceptable that today we have 30 people living in a single home and sometimes without running water. These aren't conditions that are analogous in anywhere else in Canada.
But that lawsuit, it could take years to affect change. What are people going to do in the meantime?
We spoke to a lot of families who said it's unfortunate that their adult children grow up and have no space, so they leave the community. Others stay, though, and I want to tell you about Debbie Harper. Her home is so crowded that her adult children are figuring out ways to live in the backyard. Take a listen.
My son, because of the busyness of the people, he can't handle many people in the home because he has epilepsy. He's been having seizures a lot. So what he did this summer, my son built himself a shack, and he's gonna be staying here in the wintertime. It's not much of a home, but it's a home for him. It is comfy, it is cozy, but this is his sort of heating, and this is the only way he can handle being in his own space.
Why did you need to build this?
So many people in the house and just have room for other people. More space.
My daughter, she's planning to move into this shack because she can't handle the noise. She started winterizing this room. Look at these four. It's always like this. and it's tiring. We have a right to stay in our community. If we live in the city, we're going to be in the streets. At least we have a home, but it's not suitable for us. It's not fair for our children, and it's not fair for my grandchildren, and it's not fair for me.
That must just put so much strain on them. What's next for St. Teresa Point?
That proposed class action is still in its early stages, and the chief is fighting for new housing and more resources. In the past 4 years, they've had funding for 43 new homes, most of which have been built. But he says they need 300 more. Last year, St. Teresa Point received about $1.9 million in land-based capital funding, which can be spent on housing. But regardless, with each house costing between $300,000 to $500,000, Chief Raymond Flett says it's just not nearly enough, and it's hurting the kids most. Here's how he describes the living conditions in his community.
I would say third world situations, and it's deplorable, I would say.
The Government of Canada says the community got $1.6 million for housing last year. This year's figure will be about $4.4 million. Next year, we don't know. The department acknowledged decades of underinvestment in infrastructure in First Nations communities will not be fixed overnight, but said it would continue to work with the First Nation to address the gaps. Building is also a challenge. Supplies come up by ice road in a small window of the year or by plane, and it's really expensive. Chief Flett says he's beyond frustrated.
It's about time the federal government can live up to their treaty promise, because they put us in reserves, and they took away our quality of life back then. Our people used to have, they had a dwelling, they had a place to live, and they did it on their own. And when you put people in a small piece of land and put them there with no proper way of shelter, and something very new to them, it's hard. They need to educate people out there about who we are and what we are capable of doing for ourselves. And I think that's what we want. So we can do these things ourselves and our way, and create that meaningful partnership under the terms of the treaties.
The grandmothers we met aren't even opposed to living with generations under one roof. They love their kids and they love their grandkids, but they do need the space and a suitable space to do it.
Thanks so much for this, Erin.
Thank you, Emily.
Erin Broman is a reporter with CBC Manitoba, and you can see Erin's story online with video at cbc.ca/Manitoba. Just a couple of minutes ahead of 8 o'clock, time for news headlines with Heather Wells.
Good morning. Well, True North Real Estate Development and the Southern Chiefs Organization plan to work together to redevelop downtown Winnipeg. Sources tell CBC News True North and the Southern Chiefs plan to sign an agreement tomorrow. We're going to hear more about that. And a pro-Israel activist was arrested yesterday before trying to stage a counter-protest at the Canadian Museum for Human Rights. Ron East says he was charged with obstructing a police officer before the pro-Palestinian protest. Your next Manitoba News coming up at 8:30.
Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
That's CBC's Heather Wells. And joining us now is CBC's Pat Kanuga with a look at the traffic.
Donna gave us a call at 788-3093. Said the side streets are slippery. Hearst Way, right by the Humane Society, near Waverly. She had to slow down to 20 in the loop around Beaumont Station. Very, very, very icy there. So know that those side streets could be icy. Highway 10 as well, south of Brandon, has some frosty patches and some icy patches near Glenborough on Highway 2. That from Commuter Keith. 788-3093 is our traffic number.
And be especially careful out on the sidewalks. Well, still to come, a major safety flaw in a rented SUV left a Manitoba family in a ditch on the side of the highway after a terrifying spin. We'll hear their story at 8:10. You're listening to Information Radio on CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM in Winnipeg. I'm Emily Brass, filling in this week for Marcy Markusa. World Report is up next.
With Tom Power.
Daniel McIver is one of the most celebrated playwrights in the history of Canadian theatre. His plays Monster and Here Lies Henry broke the form of what a one-man show could be. But now Daniel's in the audience watching other people perform his work, and he'll be here to tell you how that feels.
It's not a holy thing, the text. The text is a tool.
That's coming up on Q, followed by Commotion with Elamine Abdel Mahmoud on CBC Radio 1, the CBC Listen app, and everywhere you get your podcasts.
The CBC News is next. Coming up in half an hour, it's The Current with Matt Galloway.
Rick Mercer spent 15 years traveling across this country, followed by cameras doing everything from bungee jumping to chatting with prime ministers. He's here with stories about what it means to be Canadian, coming up on The Current.
This is World Report. Good morning from CBC News. I'm John Northcott. The federal government is unveiling new details of an expanded dental care program today. It's one of the key initiatives the Liberals agreed to as part of a deal with the NDP. The $13 billion benefit will soon cover dental work for older children and some seniors, but their family income must be under a certain threshold. JP Tasker has the details.
If you have one or more kids at home, you know that sending them to the dentist is not cheap.
At this time last year, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau announced a big expansion of the social safety net.
We're delivering real change with the launch of the Canada Dental Benefit.
A government source tells CBC News that the next phase of the benefit will be announced later today. Here's how it will work. If you have a family income of under $90,000 a year and you don't have access to private insurance, Ottawa will soon pick up the tab for some of your family's dental care.
But that there are 500,000 kids in this country who don't have access to dental care.
The program already includes eligible kids under 12 years of age. Coverage will now be expanded to include kids under 18. And some seniors and people with disabilities will have access, the government source said. The Liberal goal is to cover all eligible groups by 2025. NDP leader Jagmeet Singh.
And when it comes to dental care, we're going to keep on fighting to make sure that no family has to make a difficult choice of putting off essential care for their teeth because they can't afford it.
The NDP has agreed to prop up the Liberal government if it delivers on this initiative and pharmacare. JP Tasker, CBC News, Ottawa.
The Global Climate Summit in Dubai is in the home stretch. Nations are feeling the pressure to find common ground on the future of fossil fuels. It's a key issue that could determine whether the climate talks taking place right now are deemed to be historic or turn out to be a disappointment. The CBC's Kyle Bax has more from Dubai.
Good morning, all. Are we surviving?
A sleep-deprived yet determined Simon Steele, head of UN climate change, still hopeful countries will agree on new efforts to tackle global warming, even though it's nearly home time.
Negotiators have a chance right here in Dubai over the next 24 hours to start a new chapter.
Representatives from nearly 200 countries are weighing whether consensus can be reached on main priorities, like tripling the amount of renewable energy and doubling energy efficiency around the globe by 2030. There's also the controversial push to phase out fossil fuels by 2050.
It's pretty tense and nervous. Everything hangs in the balance.
Tom Evans is watching negotiations closely. He's with E3G, a UK-based climate change think tank. Never before has an agreement from a UN climate change conference made any mention of fossil fuels. And there is still stiff opposition here in Dubai.
Especially countries like Saudi Arabia, where they're saying this isn't something that we should be agreeing at all. We're reaching the really sharp end of the negotiations where everything's at stake.
Without an agreement on fossil fuels, the head of the UN says the climate summit could be seen as a disappointment, even with progress in other areas. Even if nations strike a deal to phase out coal, oil, and natural gas, any change would be gradual, especially considering the world is consuming more oil now than ever before, and demand is expected to climb further over the next few years. Kyle Bax, CBC News, Dubai.
The UN's Humanitarian Office says its staff are struggling to receive aid in Gaza. It says there's a shortage of trucks and communications blackouts are complicating operations. Beyond that, the war being waged across Gaza is making it too difficult to distribute aid beyond the Rafah border region area. Margaret Evans brings us the latest.
More than 2 months into Israel's war against Hamas, fighting now rages right across Gaza. Nearly 2 million Palestinians displaced, many more than once as they seek shelter especially from Israeli airstrikes, with the UN now calling the humanitarian situation catastrophic. Envoys from some UN Security Council countries have been invited by the United Arab Emirates to visit Rafah today, after Washington blocked a resolution on a humanitarian ceasefire on Friday. Palestinians in occupied East Jerusalem and the West Bank are staging a general strike in support of Gazans. Political analyst Noor Odeh says all Palestinians feel abandoned by the outside world.
Palestinians feel that we've been sent to the slaughterhouse and that there is international agreement that it's okay, that somehow calling for a ceasefire is not conducive to peace.
So far, the Israeli government has resisted calls for a ceasefire, saying that to end the fighting now would be to jeopardize Israel's goal of ensuring that Hamas can't hurt Israel again. Hamas has said that no hostages will leave Gaza alive unless Israel meets its demands. Margaret Evans, CBC News, Jerusalem.
We're getting more details about the latest election in Hong Kong. That's the sound of ballots being dumped out and counted yesterday in district council elections. It's the first vote the territory has held since Beijing brought in new rules. They effectively block all pro-democracy candidates from running. Not surprisingly, voter turnout is now way down. Official data show just 27.5% of registered voters actually cast a ballot yesterday. The Supreme Court of India has upheld a 2019 government decision to revoke special status for the states of Kashmir and Jammu. The 5-member court found that the agreement reached with India to secure the sovereignty of the region was always temporary. The court has now ordered that new elections be held.
We direct that steps shall be taken by the Election Commission of India to conduct elections to the Legislative Assembly of Jammu and Kashmir, constituted under Section 14 of the Reorganization Act, by 30 September 2024.
The court has also ordered that Jammu and Kashmir be restored as a state as soon as possible. India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi ran on a promise to revoke the mainly Muslim region's status in 2019. Today's decision is seen by many in India as a major victory for Modi and his Hindu Nationalist Party. But Pakistan's caretaker foreign minister is vowing to take up what he calls its illegality with the United Nations and the European Union. In Washington, a trial for Rudy Giuliani will begin today. The court will determine how much he will pay 2 Georgia election workers who he falsely accused of fraud. Giuliani was one of Donald Trump's frontmen pushing the former president's baseless election theft claims in 2020. Giuliani has already been found liable in this case. In Los Angeles,
Best performance by male actor in a television series and drama, Brian Cox, Succession.
the Golden Globe nominations are being announced this morning. One of the kings of comedy, Cedric the Entertainer, reads out some of the Hollywood names making the cut for the big show in January. That show has seen its share of controversy in recent years. As freelance reporter Steve Futterman tells us, it's not the only legacy award show trying to remain relevant in a changing media landscape.
For the last 3 years, the Golden Globes have been mired in controversy.
I'm here because I'm black.
In 2021, a Los Angeles Times investigation revealed that the Hollywood Foreign Press Association, which hands out the awards, had no black members. The organization promised changes.
For 8 months, we have worked tirelessly as an organization to be better.
But some scars are slow to heal. And that may be one of the reasons that with the 2024 Golden Globes less than 1 month away, the show still doesn't have a host. A number of big-name stars have reportedly said no, including
Will Smith just smacked the shit out of me.
Comedian Chris Rock. The last time he hosted a high-profile award show, the Oscars last year, he was slapped in the face by actor Will Smith. The Golden Globes have never been taken as seriously as the Oscars, but they have had a reputation for irreverence and a party-like atmosphere.
Leonardo DiCaprio attended the premiere, and by the end, his date was too old for him.
Now, however, award shows in general are simply not as popular as they once were. Even the biggest, the Oscar presentation,
and the Oscar goes to,
has seen its viewership cut in half in the last 10 years. And as streaming and other delivery systems become more popular, award shows may face new obstacles. Steve Futterman for CBC News, Los Angeles.
Google's roundup of the year's hot button search items has arrived. In the news category, the Israel-Hamas war is number 1, followed by questions about the Titanic-bound submersible that imploded in June. Matthew Perry and Tina Turner led all search trends related to notable deaths. And in the world of entertainment, Barbie was the number 1 searched movie. And in other Barbie news, the film just so happens to be leading the pack with the most Golden Globe nominations as well. Well, that is the latest national and international and entertainment news from World Report. I'm John Northcott. This is CBC News.
After a major safety flaw sent them into a ditch after a terrifying spin. We'll hear what happened up first this half hour. And also on any day, social media is full of people living their best lives, some with the help of great lighting and clever editing. CBC's Manjula Sevalraja examines the connection between that glossy, curated view and the rise in perfectionism. All that and more still to come on Information Radio. 11 minutes after 8 o'clock, time for news headlines with Heather Wells.
Good morning. Well, some patients in Manitoba are in pain and on hold after the government cancelled out-of-province surgeries last month. Myron Karaluk can barely walk without feeling exhausted. He's waiting on surgery to cope with severe spinal stenosis. He thought going to the United States would let him book surgery earlier. Now that option is gone. We're going to hear from him coming up. And a St. Teresa Point First Nation grandma is joining a proposed class action lawsuit her community is launching against the federal government over the state of housing in their community. Our next local news coming up at 8:30.
Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
That's Heather Wells from the CBC News Desk. And joining us now is Pat Kanuga with a look at the traffic.
Well, before traffic, once again, the comments continue to come in for you, Emily, on the CBC Manitoba YouTube channel. Peter Harvey says he likes your cheery voice on this Monday morning. So thank you, Peter, for checking us out on the CBC Manitoba YouTube channel. In traffic, 788-3093 is the traffic and commuter line to give us a call about. Not getting a ton of calls, so I'm hoping it's not too slippery out there. We did hear from Donna last half hour. She said Hearst Way, right around the Humane Society there, just east of Waverley, super slippery. So some of the side streets could be slippery, so do take it easy out there. I know Portage Avenue in front of us looks pretty good. It was pretty smooth sailing on my commute in on Main Street and Portage Avenue this morning. But again, that traffic line, 788-3093. Let us know what's happening out there before we're off the air at 8:37. Now for a look at Winnipeg weather, here is Abby Adiemi.
Good morning once again. Currently in Winnipeg, we are at -6, still stuck there for now. Today is going to be mainly cloudy. We're going to be getting that 30% chance of flurries this morning. And then it's going to become a mix of sun and cloud in the afternoon and close to your lunch hour period. The high of -1 for today. The wind chill is going to feel like -16 this morning. So if you're still thinking of leaving the house and you're thinking of how to dress, it's going to be feeling like -16 as you step out of the house. But it's going to drop down to -10 during the lunch period. So just look at it, -16, -10, that's what it's going to feel like. And tonight will be mainly cloudy with 30% chance of flurries still, and the wind will be gusting up to 60 km. So brace for that. And we'll be dropping to a low of -13 later. And this evening will feel mostly like -14. And then when we cross over into the midnight period and overnight, it's going to be feeling like -23. So you need to brace for that. Once again, in the city of Winnipeg, it is -6.
Good morning, Manitoba. Time now is 8:14, and you're listening to Information Radio on CBC Radio 1. I'm Emily Brass, in this week for Marcy Markusa. Well, it was a dream road trip for a Manitoba family until they found themselves spinning out of control on a highway, ending up in a ditch, and all because of a major safety flaw with the SUV they had rented from Budget. Rosa Marcatelli from CBC's Go Public told me the story.
Good morning, Emily.
So take us to the beginning. What was this road trip all about?
Yeah, for sure. So Winnipeg's Norm Wiley has a 12-year-old daughter, Sammy, and she's crazy about these YouTube stars called the Sturniolio triplets. And if you haven't heard of them, don't worry, they're mega popular with teenagers. So when Sammy asked her dad if he could take her and a friend on a road trip from Winnipeg to Minneapolis, Minnesota to see their stage show, he says he couldn't say no.
My daughter has type 1 diabetes, and she was diagnosed when she was 1.5 years. And so, you know, she gets needles, insulin injections every day and finger pokes, and she never says anything, never complains. So, you know, when she said she wanted to do this, I, of course, said yes.
So Norm went ahead. He booked a vehicle with Budget Rent-A-Car for the 7.5-hour road trip.
And why rent? Does Norm have a car?
He does, but for this special trip with the girls, he says he wanted a newer and safer car than the one he owns. So when he went to pick it up, he says the Budget employee assured him, aside from a scratch in the paint, the SUV was good to go. So Norm and the girls hit the road, headed south. Soon after they left, Emily, it started to rain. Here's Norm and Sammy describing what happened next.
I can feel the vehicle hydroplaning, and then next thing you know, we're doing 360s down the highway at 100 kilometers an hour. You know, the girls are screaming, I'm screaming, and then we flew like backwards into the ditch.
It was just like a really bad roller coaster. My first thought was like, why is this happening? And like, second was I wasn't gonna be able to go to the show.
Oh my gosh, that is so terrifying, especially with your young ones in the car.
Absolutely, some scary moments. So Norm says he's stunned and grateful no one was hurt.
So did they make it to the show?
They did. After the shock wore off, the girls still wanted to go. So Norm got the rental towed to his in-laws' house, and then he borrowed their car to finish the trip.
Well, I'm glad they were able to make it to the show.
Yeah, the girls too.
But what happened when they got back?
Well, a family member pointed out how thin the tire tread looked, so Norm took the rental to a tire specialist to get things checked out. And Cal Tire said that the rear tires were so bald, the vehicle shouldn't legally have been on the road.
Oh, my goodness. So what did Norm do after that?
Yeah, he complained to the Budget location where he rented the SUV. The franchise owner told him he had already been reviewing and redeveloping the inspection and maintenance programs for the branches that he owns. In that email to Norm, he said that included a plan to redesign the vehicle inspection slips to include a separate section for tires only. That franchise owner also blamed, and this is a bit unusual, possible tire thieves, saying good tires were being swapped out for bad ones when the vehicles were rented out or on the lot. He said he's installed surveillance cameras and put up some signs to try and put a stop to that.
Wow, I had never heard of that. So is that answer enough, you think?
Not according to Jeff Ornstein. He's a consumer protection lawyer who says it doesn't cut it.
That's negligence, and it's not good enough for them to say, for example, you know, we're trying our best. We've had problems in the past where we put up cameras in our place. That's really not sufficient.
So if there are safety concerns with car rentals, how many Canadians could be affected by that?
Yeah, this is big business. More than 3.7 million Canadians rented a vehicle last year. That's according to a market research company. And that is expected to grow to nearly 4.5 million by the end of this year. An automobile consumer protection expert, George Inney, says some rental companies already have a bad reputation when it comes to maintenance and inspections, and that safety can take a back seat to keeping vehicles on the road so those vehicles can keep making money. He says the risk of renting an unsafe vehicle is even higher these days, Emily, because of the recent vehicle shortage.
Has required them to be renting much older vehicles and keeping vehicles in their fleets longer. And these vehicles are going to need more maintenance and probably a more robust inspection program.
So is that the case with Budget? Like, are they doing more maintenance, better inspections these days?
That's the question, isn't it? And we put that both to the franchise owner of the location Norm rented from and to Avis Budget Group. That's the head office. Neither would say. They also wouldn't share copies of their safety and maintenance policies for all Budget and Avis locations because we wanted to see what is or isn't being done and share that with you. Norm also asked, by the way, to see the maintenance records for the SUV he rented, and the franchise ignored that request, he says.
So no answers about maintenance from the rental company. Are there any legal protections for people who rent vehicles?
So this might surprise you. Not under Transport Canada. They only set vehicle safety standards for car manufacturers. The provinces do have laws around the safe operation of vehicles on public roads. And under those laws, vehicle owners can face fines up to $500, depending on the province you live in, for driving unsafe vehicles.
Okay, so who is responsible for the unsafe rental Norm got?
Yeah, another big question, right? So that's not clear because neither Avis Budget Group nor the franchise owner would say who owns the vehicle Norm rented. And that can differ from one rental company to another. So some are calling for tougher laws. They say those are needed because of situations like this. Laws that specifically name rental companies and hold them responsible for unsafe vehicles, no matter whose name is on the pink slip. So those laws are also needed because the rentals are often driven harder and by people who are unfamiliar with the make and model, leading to more wear and tear than your average vehicle, these experts say. So, unlike anywhere in Canada, California does have this kind of law. It was introduced last year. Here's Michael Brooks. He's the executive director at the Center for Auto Safety in the U.S.
It puts them on notice so that we're making sure that every time the rental vehicle comes back to the facility, it's checked out, deemed safe, and can go back out to be rented to another person.
Okay, so that's over there, but where does that leave Norm and the two girls?
Exactly. After all of this, Sammy Wiley and her friend June Burnett say they're just happy they made the show, especially Sammy. As I mentioned, she's crazy about these YouTubers, despite, of course, the scary start. But the girls say they're not too impressed with Budget Rent-A-Car.
I think that's totally crazy. Like, they would give us a car that isn't safe. That is most unresponsible thing you can do.
Yeah, because like the car could have just as easily flipped over and we could have like died just as easy.
Yeah, Norm says he couldn't have put it better himself, Emily.
Oh, what an awful thing to happen to them. I'm glad they're okay.
Me too.
Thank you, Rosa.
Thanks for the time.
Rosa Marcatelli is a reporter with CBC's Go Public. If you have a story for Rosa and the Go Public team, send the details to gopublic@cbc.ca.
Hi, I'm Asha Tomlinson.
And I'm David Common.
And we're hosts of CBC Marketplace. We're award-winning investigative journalists that want to help you avoid clever scams, unsafe products, and sketchy services.
Our TV show has been Canada's top investigative consumer watchdog for more than 50 years. But this is our first podcast.
CBC Marketplace podcast is available now on the CBC Listen app or wherever you get your podcasts.
22 minutes after 8 o'clock, you're listening to Information Radio on CBC Radio 1. I'm Emily Brass in this week for Marcy Markusa. It's -6 right now, going up to a high of -2. Slight chance of flurries and quite windy today, so bundle up. Social media filters can give you a glow, make you skinnier, or even change everything about how you look, but there is a dark side to that distorted view. Researchers say those near-perfect images perpetuate the problem of perfectionism. CBC's Manjula Sevalraja takes a look.
Has social media caused harm to the mental health of young people? That's the question at the center of a case against 5 platforms: Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, and Snapchat. The plaintiffs are representative of hundreds of lawsuits filed against these platforms by individual critics and district attorneys across the U.S. They allege these apps have created a youth mental health crisis. This fall, a U.S. federal judge in California gave the go-ahead for the case to proceed.
A lot of our youth are spending 6, 7, 8 hours a day on social media.
Dr. Simon Sherry is a clinical psychologist and professor in the Department of Psychology and Neuroscience at Dalhousie University. He studies perfectionism, a trait his research shows is on the rise.
Today's youth would be more perfectionistic than any other generation measured to date. So we're living in a society, in a world where there's more and more pressure to be perfect. Social media is one pathway through which perfectionism reaches the minds and the attitudes of our tweens and our teens.
A 2017 UK study of American, British, and Canadian college students from 1989 to 2016 pointed to the same rising trend. Researchers Thomas Karn and Andrew Hill noted that young people were more demanding of themselves and others, and thought others were more demanding of them.
If you look at perfectionists, they don't make downward social comparisons. They don't think, well, I'm living a very favorable life that I'm grateful for because I'm not homeless. They tend to look at the highest available comparison target and to often feel that they fall short of that lofty standard of perfection that they're comparing themselves to. Perfectionism is a myth, and I would describe social media as its storyteller.
Dr. Sherry says perfectionism is linked to a host of mental health problems, including depression, anxiety, and suicidal behaviors. The case against the social media platforms details a list of features that the plaintiffs allege cause harm, including the availability of filters.
There's so many filters that can change your body and can change your shape, in addition to changing your face.
Kyla Fox is a clinical therapist specializing in eating disorders. She's the founder of the Kyla Fox Center, an eating disorder treatment practice.
I think you become accustomed to seeing yourself in that way and then thinking that you need to do whatever you need to do to be that way in real life. And I think that leads people to engaging in a lot of harmful behaviors with food in the body and ultimately feeling really low and sad about who they are naturally.
Fox says she's seen how these distorted images affect some of her young clients.
So it's not to say that we will look at an image and then develop an eating disorder. However, if we are constantly bombarded by certain ways that images appear, then depending upon our self-concept, depending upon the things that we're going through in our life, that information from those images can infiltrate in different ways for different people.
In 2019, Instagram announced that it was removing filters which suggested how cosmetic surgery could improve one's appearance. One such filter, called Fix Me, marked up a selfie the way a cosmetic surgeon would. It's now off the platform. But Instagram still has filters to make you appear thinner, enhance a feature, or change your skin color. While the hundreds of lawsuits work their way through the courts, Kyla Fox says she wants young people to be more thoughtful about who they follow online.
I think that there is something very valuable about making sure that you're absorbing information, following people, being influenced by people that actually speak to yourself, to improving your self-esteem, to giving out messages about supporting who you are as opposed to changing who you are. I think there's important boundaries that we should all hold around social media.
Dr. Simon Sherry says we need to make young people skeptical consumers of these images. And beyond individual interventions,
we certainly need to be having a vigorous debate about whether or not we should be exercising societal controls over these images. Should we be labeling them? Should we be censoring them? Are these images so damaging to our youth that we may want to not expose young people to these sort of distorted images?
The old adage goes, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. But be aware, it may be the work of a filter. For CBC Radio, I'm Manjula Selvarajah.
28 minutes after 8 o'clock, I have to admit that hearing that, I almost wish we had one of those filters for our CBC Manitoba YouTube channel. But no, it's all about self-acceptance, self-love. Right, Pat? Pat Kanuga's here with a look at the traffic.
No filters, that's right. Something to tell you about in traffic at 8:28 in the morning. So Inkster and Keewatin, there's a car stuck in a snowbank. Yes, there's a snowbank.
Oh.
In the westbound curb lane, Inkster Kuwait and westbound curb lane use caution passing. So that is on Inkster Boulevard. So in that area, it might slow you down a little bit. Now, Emily, last hour I told you I would take a look at the 14-day forecast. That's from our friends at the Weather Network. So after we plummet to a minus 16 for an overnight low Tuesday into Wednesday, after that, overnight lows are like -4, -5 for the next 13 days.
Wow.
And of course, we have that 5 coming up here in Winnipeg on Thursday, a 0 on Wednesday. So again, way above average temperatures. And even you were wondering as we head into that holiday season, we're still very, very mild. So not good for winter roads up north. Not that they're going to be seeing this, but again, it's still pretty moderate compared to what we have been having. And some people are starting to say, well, we have a skating trail at the Forks by January. So it's too early to tell. But yeah, things aren't really getting very cold for the next little while. So that is what's happening for the next couple of weeks anyway.
Yeah, I noticed the Red River kind of freezing on those colder nights and then thawing on these warmer days. Hard to say what's going to happen.
Yeah, it's not very thick on the river, that's for sure. -6, by the way, right now.
-6 and heading up to a high of -2. Slight chance of flurries and windy today. Going down to -13 tonight. Slight chance of flurries, continuing windy, and tomorrow -7 with a mix of sun and cloud. You're listening to Information Radio on CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM in Winnipeg, worldwide on our CBC Manitoba YouTube channel and on the CBC Listen app. I'm Emily Brass. I'm filling in this week for Marcy Markusa, and the local news is next.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells. Some Manitobans are feeling left in the lurch after the NDP government cancelled out-of-province surgeries. Those surgeries had been arranged by the surgical task force created by the former PC government. Myron Karalik can barely walk without feeling exhausted. He's waiting on surgery to help with severe spinal stenosis. Karalik thought going to the United States would let him book his surgery earlier.
We had some hope, in fact, that we could get surgery done in Fargo. And now with the new government canceling all of that, that's a sinking feeling. Like it's just, what do we do?
Karalik worries he'll have to wait in pain even longer. Health Minister Uzoma Eseguera says patients going out of province for treatment is not best practice. The PCs argue more staff should have been hired in the public health care system before cancelling out-of-province surgeries. True North Real Estate Development and the Southern Chiefs Organization plan to work together to redevelop downtown Winnipeg. Sources tell CBC News True North and the Southern Chiefs will sign an agreement tomorrow. True North has a $550 million plan to buy Portage Place and to redevelop them all. The Southern Chiefs are developing the former Bay Building at a cost of $130 million. People in St. Teresa Point First Nation are taking matters into their own hands. The community in urgent need of homes is involved in a proposed class action lawsuit against the federal government. CBC's Aaron Broman visited some of the families there.
Christina Wood lives in a small 5-bedroom home with 8 children, 16 grandchildren, and 1 bathroom.
It's hectic, especially in the mornings. They go to the washroom one by one.
Wood's among about 300 families in St. Teresa Point waiting on a new house. Many homes are moldy and needing major repairs.
It's deplorable.
Chief Raymond Flett says overcrowding is the most prevalent problem. The band received more than $4 million federal dollars for housing last year. Flett says it's not enough, especially with the cost of building in an isolated area.
You have to buy material, you have to pay shipping costs out of that, pay labor and all that stuff. There's no road access, you can't go to Home Depot and go purchase a window.
Back at Wood's house, mattresses line the living room floor each night where 3 kids sleep.
I need a big house. 10-bedroom house.
She doesn't mind all the kids, but says they deserve better. Aaron Broman, CBC News, St. Teresa Point First Nation.
One woman is dead and others are out of their homes after an apartment fire in Souris. Souris Fire Chief Chris Cooling says the building suffered severe smoke damage in Wednesday's fire. Spruce Woods MLA Grant Jackson says the Red Cross is helping people who are out of their homes. In Ottawa, the Liberal government will announce details this morning of its expanded national dental plan. That plan is a condition of the Liberals' supply and confidence deal with the New Democrats to keep the minority government alive. NDP NDP leader Jagmeet Singh.
When it comes to dental care, we're going to keep on fighting to make sure that no family has to make a difficult choice of putting off essential care for their teeth because they can't afford it.
If you have a family income under $90,000 a year and don't have access to private insurance, Ottawa will soon pick up the tab for some of your family's dental care. The program already includes eligible children under 12 years of age. Coverage will now be expanded to include teenagers, some seniors, and people with disabilities. Wine, 2 meals a day, and no snacking. That's Antoinetta Lomanoco's secret to making it to her 100th birthday. Family and friends packed the Commuter Centre yesterday for the milestone celebration. Lomanoco still works 3 days a week at her son's Jerry's Sorrento's restaurant in the Commuter Centre. He says his mom came to Canada in the late 60s with her families, and translating for her, she says she likes to keep busy at the restaurant.
It's always because that she just comes here. We're all here. She's amongst the family, and now that we're here, there's more other Italians. So not just our family, but everybody knows her as she's like everybody's grandmother now, and so that's more important. She likes just being here, being around everybody.
Lomanoco says she is surprised she's turning 100. She says when she was 20, she contracted bacterial meningitis and wasn't expected to live. You can find more on this story and other news from Winnipeg. All you have to do is head to cbc.ca/Manitoba.
And you can find her pizza at Sorrento's.
Yes, exactly. Let's go.
I think I'm in the mood now. Thank you, Heather.
Thank you.
That's CBC's Heather Wells from the CBC News Desk. And joining us now with one last look at the weather and the roads is Pat Hanukkah.
Well, Wes just gave us a call. He said side streets in the Waverly West neighborhood, Bridgewater area, very, very slippery. And we are hearing about slippery side streets. Main drag's not so bad, but do be careful out there. So thank you for the call, Wes. As far as the weather goes, -6 right now. We will get today to a -2. And we're going to have some gusty winds near noon, 40 gusting to 60 from the northwest. We'll get to that -2 tonight. -13 tomorrow, a -7. And then Wednesday, Thursday, a 0 and a 5. Yes, that's 5 on the plus side. And sunshine on Thursday before we're at a -2. So that's rounding out your weather week here in the city of Winnipeg. So there you go, -6 right now with some cloudy skies. We should see some more sun in a little while. Have a fabulous Monday there, Emily.
Well, you too, Pat. Thank you very much. That's our show director, Pat Hanukkah. And at the controls in the studio is Abby Adeyemi. Thanks for joining us. I'm Emily Brass, filling in this week for Marcy Markusa. Up next is The Current, and it's all about Rick Mercer today. He spent 15 years traveling across Canada, followed by cameras, doing everything from bungee jumping to chatting with prime ministers. This morning, he talks to Matt Galloway about what it means to be Canadian. That's coming up on The Current this morning at 8:37. Hope you have a fantastic day. Be careful out there. Those sidewalks are slippery. Have a good day.